This week on the Markcast, should have said the XFL Markcast, our equipment's breaking, I've got a concussion, Reed's tooth is messed up. What else is going on? I mean, there's got to be something going on, right?
This is the news we didn't think we wanted, but at least we have news. I am titling this episode "The Collapse of the XFL-CFL Merger." The CFL and the XFL have broken up. The big breaking news this week, we have all the angles covered. We have friend of the show, XFL insider himself. You wanted him, and we have him. Mike Mitchell is on here for almost an hour talking all the background stuff, all the NDAs, what was going on, how close do we get to all of this? You know, Mike talks, did the XFL waste the last 6 months of their lives?
Overall, I think it was a little bit one-sided in terms of the multiple options that were presented. I think there was a reluctance to do too much and to put too much on the table, and one side is looking at it from a completely different perspective.
Mike has opinions on all of that and potentially some XFL expansion news as well. Plus, friend of yours and mine, Farhan Lalji, comes back on the show. We had caught Farhan, right when all this news was breaking, so we kind of got his immediate, analysis.
I'm disappointed to a degree, right? I think there was some exciting things around what it could have looked like. More than anything, I was excited at the notion that Redbird Capital and The Rock and Danny Garcia and their promotional might could have put the Canadian Football League in really good financial footing.
And then we talk all about the CFL season, the player protocols and the vaccinations and all of that. And then Sammy Gahagan from the Alouettes comes on. Sammy's a player scout. We talk about friend of the show, Cole Boozer. We talk about friend of the show, Matt Mengel. Sammy has thoughts about the CFL season and obviously all the XFL stuff as well.
I'm actually kind of glad the distraction's gone for me. I think it's time that we focus on our own league at this point. We have enough to worry about right now.
All the fallout from the breakup of the CFL and XFL potential merger, and a lot of fun guests, a lot of insight on what went wrong and maybe what went right. That's this week on the Markcast. Take two. Welcome to the Markcast, everybody. It's Friday morning. How you doing?
Your lighting tonight is very Revenge of the Sith.
Revenge of the Sith?
Yeah.
I don't know what happened. I just hit I hit my...
It looks good.
I've got these two spotlights that kind of... Well, one should be over here on this stuff over here on this wall. But I moved it over here just temporarily, so I stopped tripping over the light. Basically, my brain has been scrambled the last... I don't know if you listened last week and it seemed like I was a little bit off. It's still kind of...
More so than normal. More so.
It's still a little wishy-washy, but my pistons are starting to fire again. The blast. There was a massive, controlled fireworks detonation. We use the mocking SpongeBob meme when we do the caps and lowercase controlled demolition. And it wasn't too controlled, was it now, LAPD? So with that being said, I got considered a blast wave concussion. And everything's starting to come back online. I felt it today where I was starting to go, okay, I'm starting to, my thoughts are starting to come back and I'm starting to be able to, say things in complete sentences again and not have to scramble for words. It's been an interesting week. Reed, how about you?
This is, I guess the good news is we will no longer have to talk about the CFL after today. I'm kidding. But I did have people like Bad News Brown on Twitter message. He's like, you guys are going to still talk about the CFL, right? I'm like, yes, we're going to talk about the CFL. I did have a good joke with Farhan coming up where I said, well, it's probably the last time we ever talk, But tremendous. Crazy week, everything going on, CFL, XFL, the merger, I had a show brewing. I had a good episode title brewing. And then obviously, now it's the CFL and XFL breakup. Paul is playing injured. My tooth, I believe Monday, the tooth is coming out. So we're working through all of we're podcasting under duress right now, but we're getting through it. But yes, crazy. It's kind of one of those, it was like when they announced the XFL delay, the initial 2022. And I literally had just woken up and I'm looking at my phone and you're like, oh, this is going to be like the rest of my day. Like when you start seeing like all the news, because we saw, Naylor tweeted and then Terry Jones tweeted like back to back, and I was like, oh, this is a terrible news. So, I guess let's plug the show, and then we'll do any other preface before we talk about the guests and then get into everything. I mean, I feel like there's I think we're going to have a lot of eyeballs this week. I think, Mike Mitchell addressed eyeballs. So
I'm dying to hear what you said to Mike Mitchell. Again, I was planning on being on this call, but it's a long story. Yeah. It's a long story, and I hate to do this here, but if you want to hear the story, go ahead and hop over to willhouse.vip and buy the Patreon. Willhouse. Sorry, had to plug it there. That's okay. What you get for stealing one of Will's lines.
That's okay. We got big show today. Okay, so we were going to have Farhan on anyway. We're getting ready for the CFL season, vaccination protocols, all that stuff. So Farhan was booked. All this crazy merger stuff breaks. So luckily, the pro champion that he is, Farhan comes on. We did XFL stuff. I kicked out part of that episode already this week. We got a lot of viewership on that. So we're going to re-air that part of it. I'm going to be nice. I'm actually going to put a time code in the video for when the new stuff is on. So if you've actually listened to that interview, but stay tuned, that the whole thing's going to be there because we get into all the CFL stuff. The big, you wanted him, we got him, Mike Mitchell. It's been a long time coming. Mike and I talk all about why it's taken forever to get him on the podcast. We did 50 minutes, Mike and I, on everything that you've ever wanted to know about the CFL-XFL merger, about how close they got, what fell through, what Mike thinks is coming in the future. Mike, was texting Redbird CEO on vacation yesterday. This is how in the know these things are. So when people are like, the keyboard warriors, like, well, why do you? That's what do you want me to do? That's just goes back. Literally,
I'm dying to hear this, by the way. I am dying to hear this because I feel like it confirms my suspicions.
Yeah. And so, I got commentary. Paul's got commentary. So stick through that. I want to hear Paul's thoughts because Paul and I because again, crazy life stuff. Paul and I haven't talked about any of this. So I want to get Paul's takes. I have takes. So we've got Mike Mitchell, 50 minutes, XFL, CFL merger stuff. We got Farhan. We do another 15 about XFL stuff. And then we do another 10, 15 about CFL stuff. And then we have Sammy Gahagan. Gahagan. I said it during the interview. Gahagan. It's so late. Sammy, God bless you. Sammy's Greek. It's an abbreviated name. Sammy is a scout for the Alouettes. Listeners will know, friends of the shows, Matt Mengel and Cole Boozer are currently getting ready for the training camps up there. Sammy's got lots of thoughts about CFL, scouting players. How does the spring league work into that? Thoughts about the Alouettes, thoughts about Mengel, Cole Boozer. Obviously, we talk about the XFL, CFL stuff as well. So jam-packed show. Then we're going to come back and do some other XFL-y, CFL-y stuff afterward. But I think obviously the lead story is the merger.
Can I just say two quick things?
Mm-hmm.
First things first, Jim Mullen High, scoreboard. And second of all, shout outs to the Seattle Sounders. They stand alone for the longest unbeaten streak to start an MLS season. 13 unbeaten games, 8 wins, 5 draws. The Sounders have the record. So congrats to the Seattle Sounders. Awesome work. Brian Schmetzer and the boys. We're really proud of them.
There you go. I have my initial commentary, which is pretty simple, but Paul, what are your thoughts about this merger, following through?
Okay. CFL stands. And you know what I'm talking about. Our boy Braden might be one of them.
Mm-hmm.
This isn't a for sure thing that the CFL was the one to pull the plug on this. I can guarantee you that. By seeing the reactions of these CFL fans online, it is clear as day to me that they wanted a lot for nothing. They wanted help with marketing. They wanted help with their finances, but they didn't want to give anything back to the XFL. That is clear as day to me because of how everyone reacted, like that Redbird Capital, The Rock, and Danny should all be in debt to the CFL. That's the impression I got, and I'm hoping that Mike Mitchell confirms it. But that is what I'm seeing. That is what I'm seeing. Given the, I'm sorry, CFL fans, stands, the sense of entitlement that some of you have over your league, like that you're doing the XFL a favor and you're saying the stuff like the twice failed league without taking anything into consideration, even considering that the XFL actually snapped a ball once in 2020 and the CFL didn't. The point is, in my opinion, you can't get the whole house for free. And I feel that there was a sense of entitlement there, and maybe I'm wrong, but maybe Reed can back me up on that.
No, I think, and Mike is very open in the interview, very PC. Mike's very good at walking all lines, which is great. Mike, someone in Mike's position, we're a commentary site, right? Mm-hmm. I asked Mike, I said, friend of the show, Arash, brought this up on Rod Peterson's show yesterday. And to be fair, I did offer Arash an invite to come on. Arash declined. I said, you welcome to come on and say whatever you want, criticize anything. He politely declined. Arash even asked, what did the CFL, what were they bringing to the table of these discussions? And I asked Mike that. I go, because and Mike confirms it. We've talked, they never even got to the football right. So all these complaints about 4 downs, 3 downs, to feel like none of that was ever discussed because they never made it that far, right? So if we're just talking about business, I go, Mike, so, no football aside, lineage, 108 years, everything the CFL, all that aside, what did they, what business things did they bring? And Mike kind of struggled to play that middle of the road, right? He really was like trying to walk both lines. And he even says, he's like, I'm really trying to not be too dismissive here, right? Well, it's interesting. I will say, and I think Paul caught some of this last night, some of the interactions on Twitter, which again is not the foreshadowing of anything or of everything, but where some of these players, some of these guys and girls and whatever, they're like, well, you're going to learn to love our game. Like, you just take the time. Like you did. I'm like, we've taken the time. Like most fans, like if I'm, I wasn't an NFL fan before the XFL. We get into the XFL, we do the NFL. Like nobody was sitting there like gate checking me. Like, well, how long have you been an NFL fan? Right? Like I want to watch Washington football this year because of Taylor Heineke and stuff. I interact with people online. No one's sitting there like, well, how many Redskins games did you go to, in 2017 or whatever, right? And it's this weird, it's a weird dynamic where the CFL fans, we know that we need to attract viewership, but then these same, people that have been the fans of the league for so long, and it's not necessarily people that listen to the show, but I'm saying this to everybody, like, if you see something, say something. If you see a CFL fan, like, doing these kinds of things, stop doing that. Like we need to grow this game and like, being entitled and like saying, well, you need to learn to love us. And I'm like, I am learning. We've spent all the time. Everyone says like, not everyone's going to do that. Right. Most normal fans don't sit there and go a 6-month crash course just so I can watch a CFL game.
You're 100% right. You want to grow the game, but then when Americans take interest in your game, all we're met with is like vitriol and BS. And it's like, well, what's the point of like even paying attention to this if you guys are just going to shit on us? Pardon my French, but that's the way it feels. That's the way it feels when you're online and you just get like these ridiculous. And I hope we don't bleep that, by the way. These ridiculous responses about like, oh, you can't like our game, but we need to grow our game. You need to grow your game beyond the Canadian borders. Yeah. That's the bottom line. You're running out of people to like your game, so you need to think outside the box. And that was, like we've always said here, like we've always been able to get new information, take it in and go, okay, our opinions have changed. Like we didn't understand the ratio. Our friend Jim Mullen came on, explained the ratio. Now we're like, okay, we get why there's the ratio and it shouldn't go away. There's so many things that like we enjoy about the Canadian game that we hoped the XFL would just be like, well, let's just use your rules and we're good. And that's what we're always hoping for. But every single time we're met with this, oh, we can't lose this. And we can't. Well, no one's ever saying you have to lose it. No one's saying that. No, we don't want that. I just, well, and want to grow the game, then grow the game. Put your money where your mouth is. Grow the game.
Yeah, and we have comments here coming up from Tim and Friends or whatever that guy is. My big commentary, my big takeaway, I sat all day yesterday. I really reflected on everything. And my comment was, in reflecting on the XFL CFL day, these merger talks rose and fell with literally not a single concrete piece of anything of what might actually happen. Not one. So anyone that's saying, I saw a lot of tweets of like, oh, sigh of relief, breath of, right, we don't have to sigh of relief. And I go, you're happy because there was never even anything to be scared of, right? Like there was never, I would get it if they were like, hey, we're losing, this is what we're doing and all that stuff. But like you're breathing a sigh of relief for something that was never even the modicum of happening, right? And so that to me, I'm like, good. Then I just feel like it's disappointing because I feel like everything everyone hypothesized about for the last 4 months is all, crap down the drain, right? And the CFL gets by again without having to really adjust anything. I have comments about Hodges and 3 downs comments up here, but it does just feel that way. Like, and they move along and like, you guys didn't want it and you fought and then you didn't get it. And there we go. And I'm like, I hope, I hope that works out.
I sure hope single game betting works. Cause that's what I feel you're pinning your hopes to. You're hoping that single game betting works, that DraftKings and FanDuel or Bodog or whoever is lining up with a check to set a kiosk up inside your stadium and cut you a check for 1/10 the price. And even then, maybe not that would cost them to put that in an NFL stadium. That's what you're hoping for. You're hoping for that.
And I just don't get the vitriol. And this is, now we're getting into actual media stuff. I don't get this vitriol. Terry Jones writes for Edmonton. We know Edmonton was anti-XFL. We have a statement from them coming up. But the initial tweet that came out, this is Terry Jones, verified journalist. Breaking, it's exit for the XFL. The CFL talks with the non-existent Spring League are off. After an off-season of playing footsie, it's exit for the XFL. The CFL has told the twice failed Spring League to take a hike. Like,
not accurate.
But why? Well, that's not accurate. But like, why just say the talks are off? Why do we have to you know what I mean? Like, I just don't understand what this vitriol is. Again, nothing was ever asked to be changed. They were just exploring discussions. It's very odd to me.
Yeah. And we have this little thing. I hate to bring up Wilhowski, but we have this little thing when you do something that's not funny. So when you say something like it's exit for the XFL, we play a little sound clip to let you know it's not funny. It's not funny. It's not funny. It's not clever. It really isn't.
Well, like in counter thing, Dave Naylor tweeted right after that. Sounds like the CFL has ended talks with the owners of the XFL without entering into any formal collaboration. League expected to clarify today.
That's the way you go.
That's a totally normal. That's like a totally normal way to do it. Like, sorry, right? I mean, Terry Jones, you're a CFL mark. I'm sorry. It's Again, I would go to the picket lines with anyone if they were saying they were going to make us change too much stuff. We just couldn't do it. Again, we get into it with Mike. Nothing football was even discussed. It was literally just marketing and business stuff.
Yep.
The CFL statement that was on the website, I thought it was weird. Mike and I talk about this. I thought it was weird. CFL released a statement. CFL posted. XFL did a little bit of whatever, but we really haven't heard from the XFL, right? They barely little baby adjusted the website. They changed the Twitter. So now it's XFL 2023, which I joked about and Mike and I joke about because I'm like, then is it 2024? Is it 2025? The XFL needs to lose the name in the Twitter handle. The XFL also updated their FAQ on their website, but that was about it. Anyway, CFL released a statement. They've been positive and constructive. We're working to find new ways. They're focused on August 5th, which is great. I do think it's odd that this came out, 2 days, 3 days before training camp start. I don't know if that was, I've seen tweets and hypotheses that this was a little bit of smoke and mirrors to kind of get through this off season before they had to kick off again. I mean, do you have any thoughts about that?
I don't. I mean, yeah, I'm 100% behind you on that one. Nothing to add to that.
I mean, but there is, and Mike poo-poos out a little bit. I mean, because I asked him, I go, how earnest were these talks? Because I am seeing that. I'm seeing like the CFL. Remember Rod Peterson, the first interview we ever did, Rod goes, the CFL thinks they're going to get a bunch of stuff for free. So I asked Mike, I go, how earnest were the talks? But I said, was this kind of a smoke and mirror show? Mike doesn't think so. Mike thinks that, the CFL really wanted to collaborate. Right after the Edmonton Elks, which I'm questioning my allegiance now. This was a damning tweet, and when we were talking in our XFL News Hub chat with Mike, all the writers yesterday, this was what Mike said, because we all said, well, okay, what just happened today? And Mike pointed to this statement, and it goes, "This tells you everything you need to know about why these merger talks failed. The Edmonton Elks Football Club is pleased by Wednesday's announcement that the CFL discussion with the XFL has ended. The Elks remain fully committed to the CFL and our treasured brand of Canadian football."
Okay.
And Mike goes, that is everything you need to know right there.
Is MLSE committed to the CFL and their treasured brand of Canadian football, or were they like an NFL team?
Well, Mike has many thoughts about the XFL potentially positioning a Canadian expansion here coming up, which is fascinating. If you want to spoil
that piece of red meat out there last night, and people were like, "Oh, they were mad again. They were mad again."
I'll tell you, Mike is talking north of the border and south of the border. That's all coming up on the thing. Sorry, my neighbor is backing up his lawnmower of a car right now. Arash, friend of the show, tweeted out, "A total waste of time, energy, and resources. Could have reshaped its business model instead months of idiocy, and the bag is empty. The magic of CFL 2.0 and the Ambrosi regime." It seems like more of an indictment. I mean, Arash really doesn't like Randy Ambrosi.
Clearly. I mean, that's probably one of the few things that I can agree with Arash on. Probably, yeah, and that's the thing. It's like could have reshaped its business model. That line right there, Arash, leads me that kind of down that path where it's like you guys wanted something for nothing. You guys wanted to use the resources and learn how to shape your business model better. But then you said, "Well, what does The Rock know about the football thing?" And then we point out that Redbird Capital hired someone specifically for this. It's just like that's kind of the sense of entitlement that I point to. That little line right there. Interesting. Anyway,
it's interesting too when you just think about the recent XFL hires. With the Monday Night Football and all that. That all this knowledge now, and that the CFL is still kind of choosing to mutually walk away from that. And again, Mike and I talk like it was pretty mutual, right? I mean. At some point, it's the CFL saying no, and then at some point, it is the XFL choosing to walk away. I mean, it is both of those things can exist at the same time, right? Like if you're dating,
not mutually exclusive, yeah.
If you're dating someone, you can choose to move on, and they can you can both choose to move on. It doesn't necessarily have to be. You sent this over, Tim and Friends.
I'm glad I finally found something. I was like, "Oh, Reed's gonna love this," and I sent it to him immediately.
How do you pronounce this gentleman's last name?
McAuliffe. Yeah.
Well, he tells CFL fans that you need to put their money where their mouths are.
Yeah, I love this. When I saw this, I was like, "Thank you." This is a guy saying, "You guys don't want the merger. You're fighting the merger tooth and nail." Okay, then prove why the merger's not going to work. The merger should never have been considered. Show up to the games, buy season tickets, go to the stupid Bodog kiosk now that they think's going to save the league. Do the things. I want to see some young people. We're still going to the Grey Cup. It's still going to happen. We'll still be there. Yep. And I want to see some young people there. I don't want to see like a bunch of boomers. I'm sorry. I know it's ageist kind of slander, whatever. I don't want to see a bunch of okay boomers there. I want to see young people at the Grey Cup. I want to have drinks with young people at the Grey Cup. He's completely right. He's completely right.
Well, and the interesting thing is it's not, and this is, I've had these conversations a lot online, not just on Twitter, just online lately. And you get these people, folks, and they go, I have been a season ticket holder for 45 years. I go to every game out of the year, right? Whatever. I'm like, but you are not what they are trying to attract. Like, what you are doing is wonderful and admirable, and that is you're a wonderful fan. But like that is not enough. Right. Like, and that's what they don't get. I will say, this is a little tid note. So Jim Mullen retweeted this Tim and Friends thing too last night. And I tweeted to Jim, I go, how come when I say this, nobody cares, right? But when Tim, like, this went viral, right? This crazy went viral. I go, is it because I don't have friends, right? Because it's Tim and Friends. Jim Mullen goes, yeah, but I didn't mail Tim a Football Canada toque. So I think Jim is saying that we are at a higher level.
Oh, that's very nice. Thank you, Jim. I mean, your Mariners did lose 2 of 3 against the Yankees this weekend, but I'm glad to hear it. Speaking of stuff that came in the mail, there's a box over here. By the way, I forgot to tease this.
Yeah,
there's a box over there on the ground. I will go grab it.
We'll do that bonus segment. Yeah.
And we'll have some stuff to give away. So
that's yeah. This is a little disgruntled tonight. So this is where I get a little negative now. Maybe we've been negative already, but this is when I get a little agitated. So Justin Donk of 3 Down tweets. This Tim McAuliffe thing went crazy, and Dunk goes, Uncle Timmy preaching. I hate that Dunk calls people uncle. I hate that he calls Roddy uncle. I hate that I hate that Dunk does that. But he goes, this is what I don't get. If you love football, why don't you just watch football? That's part of this I've never understood. I love NFL, but I like CFL. I like U Sports, whatever. And I responded, and I got a little bit of traction on that. I go, football's football unless it's XFL. Then just get the hell out of here. It's like, I just like football. I just like watching football. But if it's XFL, get out of my face. I don't like it.
Not football. I hate it.
No, I hate it.
I hate anybody that's ever rooted for an XFL team.
Yeah. No.
And St. Louis is the only thing that worked in the XFL.
So as I previously mentioned, the XFL, so they re-released their launching in 2022 video with a new ending that says launching in 2023, which is just horrendous. I mean, I don't know if anyone from the XFL is going to listen to this with the Mike Mitchell stuff, but like, if you would have given me an hour and $30, I really could have whipped you up I could have really whipped you up a new one as opposed to just putting that on the end.
Have you seen the graphics for our show? I could have helped you out there too.
Yeah. Look at that. They did update, like I said, it's now XFL 2023. They really need to get away from the numbers on the Twitter accounts. And then they added, this is according to Jake Henry. Don't kill me if I'm wrong on this, but it looks like they added 2 new FAQ questions. And so it says, what teams will be in the XFL and where will they play when you return? We will have many details and updates to share in the months ahead, including announcements about the teams and their venues. When will the game schedules be released? The league schedule will be released in the appropriate time. And I think XFL Reddit too was like, why add these if you're not going to have any answers? Like, why even put that in the FAQ video?
That's weird.
You know what I mean? Like,
apparently a lot of people have been, I guess, asking for that.
I get, well, it's frequently asked questions. So, this was so in conjunction with Edmonton Elks thing. So Terry Jones, we talked about, had the tweet. He had an article with the Edmonton's Sun, I believe, and he had a quote from the Ian Murray, who is the Elks chairman. We're pleased by the CFL announcement that discussions have ended. The Elks remain fully committed to our treasure brand. We are quite comfortable and confident that the CFL can thrive on its own. Unless
we didn't get single game betting, then we were screwed.
Well, I asked Mike that. Mike goes, I think that would be foolish if they're putting all their cards in that basket. I go,
they are.
I think they're putting all their cards in that basket. So we plugged this. Here are just some quotes. Mike Mitchell. So again, we did the whole thing, but his article with XFL News Hub came out late last night. Mike needs to talk to me about his publishing schedule because, I wouldn't publish it at like 11 o'clock at night, but that's fine. Mike published this. So the key point, and Mike gives context about this, but I want your commentary on this, Paul.
This is a great article, by the way. Kudos to Mike to put this all kind of in a way that was digestible for, most people. Those that hate the XFL, no matter what, probably didn't understand any of this. But this was just well done by Mike. We've known for a while that teams like Toronto and Montreal were completely on board with this because they're looking to make money. They're not looking to break even. They're looking to make money. You're in the business to make money. So these 2 teams were definitely, as Mike says here, they were receptive and the most bullish on the plans to do a merger. But the publicly owned teams hesitated to push forward because it's like a situation where you're just, you're playing checkers. You're like, well, as long as we break even or we lose a little bit of money, at least we get to protect this precious thing that 60-year-old people watch.
Yeah, I want your take on this quote. And this is an anonymous source involved with the discussion. So, this is obviously somebody at Redbird that Mike talked to. And he said, this is a quote: "Our plan for alignment is so complicated and multi-layered that I feel that all the top decision makers won't sign off on any of our final options. We've exhausted so many possibilities for alignment that will significantly benefit both sides. We've used analysis to break down why this would work financially. Still, we keep hitting snags in these talks because we can't get everybody on the same page that shares in the same vision."
Well, this is clearly someone from the XFL side of things. They're the ones that have an adequate business model because they're doing it with Fenway Sports and all this other stuff. And this has to be someone on the XFL side of things because given the fact that like Montreal and Toronto and BC and Calgary are all, supportive of the merger, but the other teams weren't, this is clearly a veiled subliminal subtweet kind of shot at those ones that are like in that old school mentality, like we're protecting this. No more. No, it's just, it seems like there was so much from, and I'm reading between the lines and I could be completely wrong.
You're not.
It seems like there's so much between the lines. It's like, we tried to compromise on this and they weren't willing to do this. And then the stuff that they wanted us to compromise on, we eventually tried to compromise on that. And then they weren't interested in that. It just seems like the goalposts were being moved, for pun intended too. The goalposts were being moved constantly by the teams in the CFL that didn't want this, no matter what. Am I wrong?
No, and that was kind of what I said. And listener Max had pointed this out too last night. And I, talk about this in the interview. I said, it seems to me like they go, here's a bunch of cool stuff. Yeah, we don't want to do that. Okay, well, here's a bunch of data behind the cool stuff that we could do. Yeah, we're not interested. Okay, well, here's some more data. Yeah, we don't want any of that. Like that to me is what that reads as, right? It's like we had a bunch of ideas. They kept getting shot down. We can't get everybody on the same page. Right.
You guys are like Jim Carrey and Dumb and Dumber, go up, sticking your fingers in your ears, going la 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 la. That's what you're doing.
Yeah, Mike also says, the term merger was thrown around. It was never that close. It was never that close to that point. Many believe that the CFL broke off. At best, the proper representation would be that the decision was mutual. And basically that the XFL has intended to implement, they're moving forward with their plans regardless, right? Mike also has really interesting takes on the timelines of like when the 2022 decision to 2023 was made. How does the CFL factor into all that? I don't want to spoil all that, but like a lot of good insights into like, was this wasted time the last 6 months? Like, were we on this path already? Kind of interesting stuff like that.
Look, the CFL got something out of this no matter what. People paid attention to their league for the first time since Johnny Manziel went up there. Congratulations. I'm saying it. People south of your border gave a crap about your league for the first time since Johnny Manziel went up there. So you got something out of it. You're relevant. Cool.
Just a couple last ones from our friend here, Mr. Hodge, and I know that Braden doesn't like it but I do feel like I criticize Hodge because Hodge is one of the focal people covering the premier people covering the league. He wrote an article. XFL was never the answer to the CFL's problems. This was the quote. If the CFL's future was reliant on the XFL, a partnership would have been reached. It wasn't. I'm like, that is the most asinine. Like, if this thing was meant to happen, like, how about the CFL said no, or they were too, again. You guys, they openly criticize the CFL for like struggling to market, but then they're like, well, clearly if they would have known that this was the right decision, they would have. I'm like, I don't get how you can, crap on them in the one hand and then crap back. Like, yeah. And then the other quote was, if the CFL didn't believe it could sustain post-pandemic, it would have folded by now. It hasn't.
Just wait.
Well, even Farhan said in his interview coming up that aired earlier, he goes, well, I think the CFL realized they weren't in as dire straits as they thought they were. I mean, that's like coming from Farhan. Like, that's like he's saying, like, I think that they really were worried in October and they're not, like, they think they're okay now.
I mean, okay, they're okay now because all of this BS has generated interest in their league. That's why they're okay now. I mean, we're going to watch. Reed and I are going to watch. I hope there's some kind of thing that we can buy. We can, maybe the VPN. I don't know.
ESPN Plus has CFL games.
Oh, it does?
Yeah. Huh?
Cool. Very good.
Yep.
Good to know. Yeah, I killed it. Sorry, I had to fly in my house. That's been bugging me for like 3 days. So I mean, we're going to watch the games. You have 2 new viewers here. Hopefully you CFL fans. Hopefully you CFL fans will allow us to watch the games with you. You won't, tell us not to watch your beloved product and then complain about it not growing. But we're going to watch anyway. So yeah, I'm hot. I'm fired up.
Yeah, I can tell. It's good. It's good. So we're going to toss to some experts. We're going to toss to Mike Mitchell. We're going to toss to Farhan. We're going to toss to Sammy. Again, Mike's all XFL stuff. Farhan ends with CFL this season, and then Sammy is mostly, this season, and then we get a little XFL. So that's the order that we're going to put them in. So check back with that. We have more CFL stuff and then XFL news coming up after the break. And I'm just tossing to that because Paul is typing notes in the Google Doc. Well, we have the big XFL insider, Mike Mitchell, here. I want to thank you so much for taking the time. Mike and I talk a lot online, people, and it's always, when's Mike going to come on the podcast? And I'd always said, all these other XFL shows and podcasts and everything else, hey, we're bored. We call Mike Mitchell. I go, Mike Mitchell, I'm going to cherish this information. Here we go, big XFL merger talk stuff. I'm going to break the glass today. We're calling Mike Mitchell. He's making time in his crazy schedule. Mike, thank you so much for coming on. First off, how are you doing?
I'm doing well. Thanks for asking, Reed. It's a pleasure and an honor to be on with you. I also, by the way, appreciated all of my XFL cohorts and all the guys that co-writers with me with the Jets and everything else that I do. I appreciate the fact that, especially with the XFL guys like Josh Davis and Jay Noakes and all these people, Anthony Miller, yourself included, Mark Perry, everybody else, that they don't impose upon me and ask me, Mike, tell me the truth. Tell me what's going on. Tell me the truth. I've always figured that I'd get those phone calls. Okay, I know kind of phone calls. So please tell me. I won't tell anybody. So I'm glad you guys haven't done that to me, because it's really hard. This whole time period, the last few years now covering the XFL since 2018, it's hard. Sometimes you get a lot of privileged information and you try very hard not to betray anyone's confidence or trust. And a lot of times my articles or what I say, you have to read between the lines, because I'm trying it's very challenging to try to walk that delicate balance of giving out information and being informative and letting people know what's going on and not betraying the confidence and trust of others. So yeah, long overdue. I'm glad to be on the Markcast. This is such a great show. You guys have done such a great job. I think you've really shined in these last few months. I think you guys have evolved as a show. You've welcomed everybody on from every angle. You've reached out. You guys are active on social media. I appreciate what you guys do.
Well, thank you. Yeah, because give me info, and I tell you, because people send me stuff, and I'm like, we're just a commentary site. I mean, whether I hear it from you, a month early or it comes out, I just, I'm not going to talk. Here's the thing. Here's the thing people don't know about you. You have a background in journalism. Yes.
So even though you're a commentary site and all that, and you guys play nice and you're friendly, you try it best you can. You have a journalistic side to you, and you will call people out on their stuff, for lack of a better term. So I'm mindful of that. Sometimes we have conversations. I'm like, I don't want to slip up. I put enough pressure on myself as it is. So, people don't realize your background. They just think you're some crazy guy from the Pacific. It's just some rabid football fan. They don't realize that, you have standards. So there you go.
All right. Enough of the niceties. We got all that out of the way. Mike, what the hell happened? What happened? What happened? I thought we were going. What happened? That's my question.
What happened was the ownership structure. It's hard enough getting two people to agree on one thing, let alone, 9 different ownership structures and the XFL ownership structure. I think the XFL, Redbird Capital, Danny Garcia, Dwayne Johnson, they spearheaded these talks with the CFL, and the CFL was interested because, quite, to borrow an old Rock catchphrase, they smelled what the Rock was cooking. They liked what he was cooking. So they liked what the XFL was bringing to the table and what they were presenting. And I think the CFL benefited from having these talks. It's not to say that the Canadian side didn't have a lot of good ideas in these talks, but I think at the end of the day, to answer your question, I think they couldn't come to an agreement. They didn't arrive in lockstep in terms of what they wanted to do. I think some of the owners, some of the ownership groups in the CFL were a little hesitant to move forward and saw the venture as potentially risky. And so, and they're not, a lot of the owners and the community-owned teams, they're not in the business of big business. They're localized. They don't, I'm not trying to be insulting in any way, but they're not big picture business people. And so trying to get those people to be on the same wavelength is difficult. So they narrowed down their options. They thought that they were headed towards the right direction, but along the way, they just couldn't get everybody to agree. And I think it wasn't just the CFL side saying, let's pass on this. I think a big part of this was the XFL saying, well, they're not really on board with what we really need to do. So we got to just end this. It isn't going to work. It isn't going to work out. And I think people, the narrative out there hasn't really been painted that way, but that's from what I know from, I know people doubt us. From what I know, speaking with people inside the leagues, and I talk to a lot of people on the Canadian side, this is true. So this is why these talks broke off.
Yeah, and when we talk, small market or small picture, it is not a demeaning thing, right? I do wedding videos, and I'll tell our couples, like, we are a meat and potatoes company. You got some of these guys, girls, they'll fly all over the world, shoot helicopter, all this kind of crazy stuff. That's not us. And it's okay. It's okay to be a smaller market, smaller focused football team or a football club or league. I mean, like, that's not a criticism, even if it's factual, right? You know what I'm saying?
Right. I agree with you. And it wasn't just business either. It wasn't, a lot of it was strategy. The ideas that were coming together, everybody wasn't on board with them. So a lot of it was strategy. Some of the owners wanted to do certain things, some didn't. Some weren't on board. They tried very hard to get everybody on the same page and on the same wavelength, but at the end of the day, they decided to part ways. The XFL's plans are still in play. They're going to go about it a different way now. And so we'll see what happens with the CFL. I'm excited for their season. It's going to be fun watching. I'm so happy for the players, the coaches. That's the thing that gets lost in all of this. People like to paint a brush on, let's just say it, XFL fans. They'll say negative things about XFL fans. But I find from my experience, I'm an NFL fan first. I'm a huge college football fan. I've been watching football for, hard to believe now, but since I was about 6 years old. So over 3 decades worth. So I think a lot of times people don't realize that the people who watch the XFL, support the XFL, are the most purest of football fans out there. And they watch every kind of football. I mean, they love, by the way, they'll watch CFL, they watch indoor league. They've done it for years. I can speak for myself on this. I've watched every single league that's ever been out there. A week ago, I was watching a United Football League game between the Sacramento Mountain Lions and the Omaha Nighthawks, which was their highest rated game ever. And I remember the hope and the promise of that league, and it didn't really quite work out. They decided to play in the fall, but that's neither here nor there. But my point is, I think people like to paint XFL supporters with a negative brush. And I think they don't understand how pure and how much these people are so open-minded about and have an appreciation for football players and all that. And an appreciation, believe it or not, big time for the CFL, as I do.
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing is we would get these Canadian, CFL fans, and they would be just like angry. And I'm like, as passionate as you are about your league, and rightfully so, the XFL people, rightfully so, care just as much about their alternative football leagues and stuff. I mean, it's not we are both, two mirrors of the same coin. You know what I mean? I have so many questions. But just okay. So first off, and this idea has been floated around a lot. So obviously you have your wonderful article at XFL News Hub. We're going to talk about it in the show and pull out some quotes and stuff.
Thank you.
Was this just propaganda as a way to cover the CFL and kind of fill this time till they hit the field again? Because it is very odd that these talks went away as we're entering training camp right now.
The conspiracy theories are all over the place right now. And but I'll say this, some of the recent developments might have influenced a couple of the decision makers in the CFL, single game betting, wanting to a little bit hesitant about pushing forward with something that was more on a grand scale and wanting to ride this out was kind of a sentiment that I heard from one side. So I think the recent developments may have shied certain teams away completely. But I think there's a lot of conspiracy theories out there right now that are kind of like been out there for a while, like the merger term. And, they never even got to that point where they talked about rules and all that. And I can tell you, maybe it's you and I, we're just two guys here, but I'll just say that if the reverse was in play and we found out that the XFL was going to play CFL style football in America, you and I probably, I know from myself, I wouldn't have had an issue with that. No. But there's a lot of American football fans that we know that would have said, this is ridiculous. Why are you doing this? You got to retrofit these stadiums, play American style football. So there would have been, if the story got out there that the XFL was going to play a CFL style, there would have been some backlash on our end, south of the border, from American football fans of why are you playing the Canadian style? We don't care about that league. So part of me gets the sentiment that came from the Canadian side. I'm not saying I agree with everybody's opinions, but I understand it.
So you think that these talks were entered into earnestly? I know that right early on, I mean, it feels like, decades ago now, when all this came out, we had Rod Peterson on the show and he goes, CFL is just trying to milk some ideas from the XFL, right? They're going to do what they're going to do. They think they can get the rocks, whatever. I mean, were these earnest talks? Was it the CFL trying to leech some ideas off? I know that's been floated around, kind of in our chats and then in other private messages to me from other writers that we know.
These talks were earnest, but it's funny that you say that milk some ideas out of the XFL. There's no question that both sides, I'm not going to say it's one-sided, but there's no question that the CFL benefited from talking to Redbird and seeing what the XFL's, they know now. The CFL knows what the XFL's vision is. They know it completely. And the XFL knows what the CFL is looking for from the league and all that. And they provided what they provided in these talks and all that. But it was earnest from the beginning. It was really an interest. It's business. So why wouldn't you be interested in making more money? Why wouldn't you be interested in creating more revenue streams? Why wouldn't you be interested in exposing your product internationally and all over the world and making your product more popular? And so the CFL was certainly interested. They liked what the Redbird was selling in terms of gambling and everything else. That gave them ideas. So maybe there's some of that came out of this for them, beneficial for them. And I think even in their statement that they released, they talked about how constructive these talks were, how positive they were and constructive these talks were in terms of innovation and everything else. So they learned a lot from these talks. Whether or not they revisit anything in the future, it's possible that they could work on a few things. But I think the XFL is going in their own direction with their grand plan, and the CFL is going to try and cross their fingers and hope that their league model improves and nourishes and gets better over time. Hopefully, this experience makes their league better. And hopefully the Canadian crowds are the ones that show up are certainly going to be appreciative. But hopefully the Canadian market itself starts backing these teams more financially and supporting them. It's one thing to, have a vocal minority online, but when your team's been around for hundreds of years and you can barely get 13,000 fans in your stadium, or 15,000 or 16,000 or 17,000 like BC and Montreal and Toronto did the last time they were playing. So you got to get to the point where you shouldn't be at a point now with the CFL where you've only got 3 or 4 healthy franchises. That's not a healthy league. So you got to get to a point where all 9 franchises are strong and healthy and pushing forward. And that's something I wrote months ago on the CFL News Hub. But anyway, that's my feelings on that. So.
I've talked about it on the show, and I think we were going to try to do a phone call one day just to kind of chat about this stuff before all this came. My belief is, CFL and Farhan even talked about this on the, the interview that we published, and it's going to be re-aired in this episode, that, CFL was feeling maybe a little desperate, right? October-y time, we got COVID, we're coming off that, we're coming off the money, all these issues. Single game sports betting, okay, that passes. And it seems like once that groundswell came, or like, okay, well, we don't need this other money now, right? Like we can't, as Ambrosi said, in one of the statements, we want a made in Canada solution, right? That we don't need. I mean, are those connected? That as the single game, because then I heard on the opposite that, oh well, no, single game sports betting is only going to fuel these partnership talks because it's going to be a stronger league together. But it does seem to me like the second single game sports betting passed and they had this other money coming in, that they didn't need the XFL anymore. The CFL didn't.
It's a factor, but I think it's a little bit short-sighted if that's what ultimately ended their talks. Like, you can understand the risks. If it's just single game betting, I'll say this, right? Gambling has been along for a very long time. And so even before it was legalized here in many states, as it is now in America, and before single game betting, people who wanted to gamble did gamble for many, many years, decades. So in order for your product to benefit from gambling, your product itself has to be popular. And I'm not saying the CFL isn't popular. It certainly is. It does well. But you to benefit from it, every single team has to have strong interest, strong popularity. The sport itself has to be dominant. So, it's people gamble on lacrosse, but how much money does lacrosse make from that? I don't know. But I'm not comparing to CFL lacrosse. I know a lot of people get upset about that. But my point is, if you're just banking on the single game betting, that's a short-sighted view.
That's what I mean, but I really do believe that. We'll have to see. But I mean, Paul,
it's going to help. It's going to help. It's no question. It's going to help. But it depends how you do it. Gambling, what it comes down to is accessibility. There's going to come a time one day when you go on the Kansas City Chiefs website and you can bet directly there how many yards Patrick Mahomes is going to have, or bet over 275 or 300. And once NFL teams make it, get to the point where they can legalize it and make it accessible for everybody, I don't care if it's grandma, to bet on how many yards Zach Wilson is going to throw for in week one, that's where these leagues are really going to benefit. So it's about accessibility and promoting, and they'll try to do that with different partners. So gambling partners, that'll help, but you need to understand how to streamline it. It's not enough to just talk about it and hope that, Jim, Jack, and Billy go and bet on your games. You actually have to create an avenue for people to follow where they can put their money down on the game. So you have to make it accessible and easy for them. So if they can figure that out, maybe they picked that up from the talks, then that could be beneficial. They're going to lose money regardless this year.
Yeah.
So, because of the situation with fans and all that, they have a shortened season. They've already lost money. We saw Saskatchewan release their figures from last year, the COVID season. They lost whatever it was, 7.5 million, whatever the numbers they released publicly. So it's about improving upon their business model. And if you're just relying on single game betting, my opinion is that's not going to cut.
Well, and I don't either, but I do firmly think that they think that. It's interesting that Hodge, and I know that you and Mark had talked to them. I mean, there's no love lost with us in 3 down, but he wrote, "Oh, thank God all these XFL talks are done. Now we can get back to adjusting the game building whatever he said, improving the game." I go, What was it about talking with the XFL that prevented you from doing all this before? That's what I don't. And like all these people now, and I could get really, we try to keep a pretty level head on the podcast. I get a little more opinionated on Twitter, but it is like, I don't understand what has prevented the CFL in the last 30 years from doing any of this stuff. That now, now we can move on. Now that these XFL talks are done, now we can make all these improvements that we didn't do before.
Yeah, it's funny because when you think about it, it's difficult to expand your profit margins when you're only a 9-team league in Canada. It's not like they can go to 16 teams. That's a big part of gambling too, by the way, in fantasy. More teams you have, more fantasy, more gambling you have, more games to gamble on. So anyway, but it's hard for the CFL. So they try to get creative in terms of how they're going to create new revenue streams. So I'm sure their talks with Redbird help. As far as 3 Down Nation, nothing but respect for anybody who covers football leagues. So I got no issues there. Everybody's got their opinions. I understand where somebody like Hodge is coming from. He's a diehard CFL guy, so he got very defensive during all these talks, and he was scared about losing his game. I respect that. Justin Dunk is another person I respect. That's one of the best things that I've experienced during this whole process is interacting with the people like Dave Naylor and Farhan Lalji. Nothing but respect from those guys from a journalism standpoint. I know there's some people say negative stuff about them, which is ridiculous to me. But anyway, those guys are cream of the crop, and I'm not just talking about just Canada, by the way. So that's kind of the story there. So I get it. Everybody's got their own opinions on that. And, it's just the way it is. But CFL needs to, there's not a cure-all. It's going to take them time to actually get to the point where all 9 teams are strong and solid. And so hopefully they're able to pull it off. I love the league, so I want to see them succeed.
A quote here that you have, and this was in your article from XFL News Hub. This was your anonymous source involved with the alignment discussions. Our plan for alignment is so complicated and multi-layered. I feel that all the top decision makers won't sign off on any of our final options. We've exhausted so many possibilities for alignment that will significantly benefit both sides, and we have used analysis to break down why this would work financially. Still, we keep hitting snags in these talks because we can't get everybody on the same page that shares in the same vision. To me, that sounds like we had a bunch of cool ideas. We showed them a bunch of stuff. We showed the analysis of the stuff. We showed them the data of the stuff. We showed them the data and they weren't interested in any of it. Give me some context for that quote.
Okay, I'll try as best as I can. It was a little difficult to get clearance on that, so
that's okay.
Thank the individual who allowed me to use that quote.
Does he raise his eyebrow like that?
Yeah.
Is he involved in Terramon?
But I'll tell you this, though. Getting all the decision makers to agree includes it's not just a north of the border thing, because the XFL wasn't happy with some of the ideas that were coming from the other end. And they're part of the reason these talks broke off as well, because they, not everybody was in unison with each other. So it just didn't work. It didn't work out on that front. That quote is very telling, obviously. And your analogies are funny as hell. No question about it.
I mean, am I off base that much?
You're not far off. You're not far off. I'll say that much. You don't want to go too much further on that.
I think even as of today, I believe Arash Madani, friend of the show, on Rod's show, they were talking about all this stuff, and Arash said, basically like what did the CFL bring to the table, right? We know the XFL, we've touted all this, The Rock and Redbird and $4 billion, all that stuff. Obviously I would say the CFL has, the lineage, right? The history, that kind of stuff. In terms of if this was not football related yet, these merger talk or, not more, whatever, if they hadn't even gotten to football yet, what business things did the CFL bring to the table as far as your knowledge?
That's an excellent question. I think they already have a global initiative that they were looking into, plans that they've discussed during those talks with the XFL, how they want to expand their product, how they think they can do it together. The XFL has their own global vision as well, so they gave their ideas. I don't know as far as the variance or or as the variety in terms of business solutions. There were some ideas shared by different entities involved in those talks that have businesses other places. So, but overall, I think it was a little bit one-sided in terms of the multiple options that were presented. I think there was a reluctance to do too much and to put too much on the table, and one side is looking at it from a completely different perspective. Is thinking about streaming partners and Mexico and everything else. So probably we'll get into that in a minute or so, but that's kind of the story there. So I'm trying very hard here. I'm walking a fine line trying here not to be negative or say anything negative, but I'll say this on the CFL side, there are some groups there. There are some owners there that have a good history with business, and they know about business solutions and all that.
I think, and hopefully this isn't out of step, but I think in the messages yesterday we shared on the chat, the idea was the CFL is potentially taking hundreds of dollars now when they could have thousands of dollars in the future.
There's an argument for that.
Well, what is that argument?
There's an argument going the safe route, and not wanting to take the risk. And so that's maybe why most likely why these talks are done. It's a business and a strategy thing. It's more than just business. It's also how you strategically want to do things. And, one side wants to, expand upon certain things, and another is maybe a little reluctant to do it, doesn't see the value in it, or maybe doesn't have the foresight to see the value in it.
We mentioned here, the international talks and all that. You said maybe we'll hit on it in a minute. So let's hit on that. Talk about the global vision, or I think even in the XFL statement, which was weird. Like they didn't put it on the website. I think they just sent it to like News Hub and Newsroom or whatever. It just seemed weird that they didn't actually, it wasn't like posted on the website. I thought whoever, I'm sure, Danny, if you're listening to this now, let's like, let's get that part of an update on. But I think even the statement was talking about continuing the international growth of spring football, right? So comment on that.
Okay. So there's some questions involved here, and this is currently something that a story that I'm digging on right now, but I've reached out to a few people and asked them questions about this. So I'll present the questions to you. What could it mean to the 2020 markets of the XFL? All right. So I think there's a chance we could see an alteration there if there's an international element or an addition to the markets that they already had. From what I've heard the last few weeks, Mexico is definitely in play for the XFL. And here's the kicker on this one. What would it mean if, now this might be a little bit troublesome, what I'm about to say, this is like, don't hit send in your brain. What if the XFL still explores Canada without the CFL? How would the CFL feel about that? Now, there's some people already that are jumping on the possibility. I don't know how feasible it is or even possible of CFL teams making the jump. I'm hesitant to even say that. But what if, and I wouldn't rule it out, by the way, the XFL, one of their teams in 2023 played in Canada, American style. So that's something to ponder. I'm looking into all this stuff. I know some of that is speculative. Some of it is what I've kind of heard on the grapevine. But I think it's a possibility. Both those things that I mentioned. There's going to be changes around the margins to the XFL markets, and whether that's going to be venues, locations, and all that. You could argue that announcing that you're coming back with 10 teams would be awesome if you can make that work financially. Expand the league a little bit. That might soften the blow for the league not playing in 2022, telling them you're expanding. But I think it's very likely that the XFL is going to be doing something in Mexico. And I also believe that there's interest in doing something in Canada. Now what that entails, wait and see.
I like that. I tell you, as much as we call out CFL homers for, clutching to this, the pro clutching or whatever. I mean, I've said the same thing for the XFL forever, right? That, just because we had and even still, it's so funny to this day, like Mark Perry and everybody, all the people were, well, we got the XFL draft in October. I'm like, just because they did it one time 2 years ago, it's like, well, they did, they did the summer showcase the last week of June. I'm like, that doesn't matter. Like, I know that we go back and forth with listener Max a lot. And it's like, I remember back, I think a year ago, and it's, well, how many of the same original teams are going to return players, for whatever? Well, right. Spoiler alert, none of them anymore, right? And so, no, I mean, I think that's exciting, right? But I know, and I want to obviously get to this too, is the disgruntlement right now with current XFL fans because of all this, right? Because and I guess I have a lot of questions with that, but in terms of changing, the landscape, I do think that might scare some people, or not, that some of the vision that they had for what the XFL was before isn't necessarily going to be the vision that Danny and The Rock and everybody has moving forward. Did the XFL just waste the last 8 months in these conversations now that we're kicking off in 2023? And that's confirmed, right? I mean, we had batted around that. That's now on the website. But I mean, that's the sentiment I've heard in the last, 28 hours or whatever is XFL has wasted the last year now doing these talks, and now we're not kicking off for another year. Did they waste this time?
I don't think so, because I the way I saw it, they weren't going to have a season in 2022 to begin with because of their plan. Their plan is still pushing forward. It's just pushing forward without the CFL involved. So I think it's tough for XFL fans, and I think it's tough for fans of these leagues, whether you were a fan of the AAF or the XFL. A lot of these leagues come along and they make grand promises and they fail to live up to them. And they tell you about all these great dreams and great ideas they have and what they're going to do. And the AAF was going to revolutionize technology in football, and they were going to have the greatest app in the history of apps. And it didn't really work out with them. And then, the XFL wasn't their fault. They had a great league, and then the league ended for the reason that it did, because COVID ended it. But I think until the XFL proves itself and starts to show hints of being alive, because right now, the best way to say it is it's kind of dormant publicly, because they're starting over. It's a league from scratch. They have an awesome team behind the scenes. And there's no question they have the capital and the resources and the finances and the expertise from an entertainment standpoint and everything else, sporting standpoint, to make it work. But until they start making actual football moves, they're not going to be considered a football league. Until they deliver on the great promise that the XFL, it's going to be hard to match up with the promise of the XFL. For those of you who didn't watch the XFL in 2020, you missed out. But it's going to be hard to live up to the promise that league showed, or to top it. I think they can do it, but it's easier said than done. Running a pro football league is very expensive. And so making it work is not going to be easy at all. But I understand the sentiment out there, the people who have doubt. They have every right to have doubt, because these leagues have failed before in the past. They've had issues failing to launch. There's so many promises out there that haven't been fulfilled. So pushing the league back to 2023, it creates even more doubt until they start making moves. So I think 2022 for them is going to have to be a productive year in terms of news. And a lot of those plans that I've written about, talked about in the past, documentary shows, everything else that gets complementary to the league, that leads up to the build-up as a rampway towards 2023, that's going to have to be implemented. You mentioned something there quickly. I just wanted to say this. You mentioned the timeline. I talked to somebody yesterday close to the situation, and they hinted to me that we could see the XFL returning in April of 2023, which would buy the league a little bit more time in terms of setting everything up that they want to set up. It also gets them out of that window that everybody talks about, March Madness. The Super Bowl is now pushed back anyway, so the XFL would have been starting either late February or early March to begin with, regardless. So I think we could see a little bit of a different timeline, April through June, something like that. Now that might be so great in Houston, playing in that heat in Houston in June, but I get, players are tougher than people think. They can put up with the elements. So that's kind of the story there, but there's a lot of layers to this. I get that people are having doubt, and until the XFL steps up to the plate and starts swinging, people are going to have their doubts that this league's going to not only make it, but come back and be what it was.
Because it is, and like I said, we try, if anything, on the podcast to call everything the way it is. If we're critical of fan controlled football, we're critical of the spring league, and I'll be critical of XFL. It does feel a little bit like a joke now. We updated the Twitter yesterday. Now we're XFL 2023. It was 2022. It was 2020 before that. It is, and people already. I think Jake Henry had sent over, there's XFL Twitter accounts made like 24, 25, 26. I'm like, it's becoming a little bit of, a joke that way. And we've said before, because obviously, this USFL news coming back, and I have a question about that, but the USFL stuff coming back, and people ask, why can the USFL, this is again all in theory, why can the USFL launch next year and the XFL can't, right? And you've written and we've talked, this grand vision, right? And I've said on the podcast, maybe it's too grand, right? Where I think with Brian Woods in them, it's like cavemen putting ball on the field. No disrespect intended. Danny and the Rock and Redbird, it's like the Matrix, and we've got layers on layers, and it's all, and I don't know which one's right, but and obviously I think the correct answer is maybe somewhere in between. But is this vision too grand that we need a year and a half of programming to lead all this stuff out? Do we need that? XFL last time didn't have that, and it seemed like it was doing A-okay before pandemic and everything.
All right, that's an excellent point, and I love the way you frame that. The differences between the USFL.
No
and
disrespect
the
to
XFL.
friend of the show, Brian Woods, but
Brian Woods.
a little
It's smart.
caveman.
You know, it's smart too in terms of finances. To just if you're looking to run just a football league and present just football, I get that from a financial standpoint. If you're trying to do what Redbird and everybody else is trying to do involved with the XFL right now, that's going to take a lot of coin. I'll say this about Redbird: they don't invest in things unless they figure to see their profits expanded greatly and immensely and multiplied. So they'll put in $500 million as a sure bet that they're going to get $1 billion back. That's the kind of bet they're making. As far as like the USFL goes with their model, I think right now there's so many different rumors about how they're going to handle things, whether or not they're going to have enough time to be in individual markets, whether or not they're going to rely on individual owners. I've heard rumblings about that recently, about potential individual owners for the teams. What's that for? To help pay the bills. So that's a little bit alarming sometimes, because in the past, Brian Woods with the FXFL, he tried that. The UFL had issues with their owners. So relying upon, we know about the USFL, everybody talks about the former president, but they had a bunch of owners that were flawed and couldn't pay the bills, and players had to go to their owners' houses with guns to get their money, and owners were hiring their farm hands to be the punter and all kinds of stuff. So there was UFL basically didn't have any money to give their players equipment and rolling and athletic tape and everything else. So anyway, but I think the USFL also, there's a lot of doubts about them making it work, because once you open up that cash register and start to operate a genuine pro football league and pay your players and all that, then the bills start coming in and you got to pay them. So we'll see how it goes. I think they have a chance. The name USFL has some goodwill, and it's going to be interesting to see how they do. They're going to have to promote it, market it better than they did the spring league, and they're going to have to put more money into it to make it work. And it's going to have to be legit in every way possible. So I'm rooting for them. Again, it would be interesting to see how they do, and it's great for players if the USFL and the XFL is on the market there for sure.
Did the USFL announcements play any factor at all into anything else that was happening? I know we had talked offline, were Redbird and Danny and the Rock, were they shocked by everything? I mean, what factor, if any, did that play? And were they stunned by this announcement or not?
They weren't stunned at all. Matter of fact, the people I spoke with were complimentary. They thought that the USFL showing up on Fox and being in that space shows how viable football is in that time period. So I was surprisingly, there were the conversations that I've had, there weren't any kind of remarks that were like, down-putting or kind of putting their nose in the air or trying to say anything negative about it. I didn't hear anything like that. I don't think none of what the XFL is doing right now has anything to do with the USFL. I don't think they're concerned. They have a different operation. So when they unveil that, I mean, they were gonna play in 2023 regardless of what happened with these CFL talks, whether they aligned, whether they didn't talk, any of that. So that's kind of what people are not really focusing in on. So the fact that the USFL is coming back on the marketplace in 2022, doesn't mean all of a sudden the XFL is going to say, you know what, we're coming back in August of next year. We got to get back out there. They're not going to rush back into the market. They're being very methodical in their approach, and we'll see. We'll see if they play it. We'll see if maybe the XFL is wrong for not considering them more of a threat. We'll see, but it doesn't change their vision or their plans at all.
So, do you feel that they were on a path? The XFL was on a path to a 2023 launch. At some point, that changed since. I guess, when did the announcement get made? August, right? We're coming back in 2022, like right. late August, right?
August was when they purchased the league out of bankruptcy, and then I want to say, and I could be wrong on this, so you can correct me if I'm wrong, but October, I want to say, is when they announced, okay, here's when we're coming back, because we had a little bit of that period in between them announcing the 2022, where people were pushing for a 2021 season, believe it or not. Yeah. And here we are waiting for 2023, but there were people talking about, hey, let's hub it. Let's put them in one stadium. Let's put them in Houston. Let's do this. We'll work around COVID, all that. So for a while there, 2021 was in play, at least in the minds of people. Yeah. And then they announced 2022. So from everything I've heard, they weren't quite ready to go. and like, you know, even before these talks happen. And then these talks definitely push them more towards, you know, steering away from rushing out there in 2022, if that was ever an option in their heads. They want to do this right. I think when you only get a second chance to make a first impression, I understand this is the XFL under its third iteration, but this is Redbird Capital and Danny Garcia and Dwayne Johnson's first venture into a sporting league. So they want to get this right. So they want this to be a smashing success. Whether or not they'll be able to pull it off remains to be seen. But 2023 was the likelihood all along. Is, you know, I know people don't like to hear that, but that's just the way it is.
So with these talks and everything, it did seem like, and not that the CFL was very vocal, but I feel like they were, you know, and it helps to have Commissioner Ambrosi, you know, be a little bit more of a public figure right now, right? But even like, you know, as of yesterday, you know, the XFL website, you know, they give these statements out to the media. You know, there's the video is redone, but it just says 2023 now at the end, which I think is a really bad look. I mean, you know, some of these things, but why not do something to be a little more public out facing, even if there's nothing to talk about right now?
You know, there's an argument for that. No question about it. I think right now they don't have, to be honest, they don't have anything to announce. So that's really the story there. And they didn't expect they didn't expect these talks to fall apart at this point. They thought they were going to they narrowed down their options. As I mentioned in my article, they narrowed down their options. They were getting close. And so, but things kind of broke off towards the end there. Not everybody could agree upon things. And so, yeah, it would be beneficial from a public image standpoint for them to be a little more active. But until they actually have some meat on the bone for everyone to look into and to be interested in, they could have handled the situation a little bit better, how they announced it on social media and everything else. It created the appearance that maybe they were floored by this news, and, you know, they didn't expect it. I know a lot of people expected that by year's end that they would announce what they were doing with the CFL, and then at that point they would announce that 2022 is off. So it seems kind of forced. And that in June, where are we now? July, in July that we found out on the way that we did. They're going to have to do a better job moving forward of presenting a public face and image. You know, a lot of people get the impression that Danny Garcia and Dwayne Johnson are, you know, they're not really talking about the league. They're not promoting it. They're not really saying that much about it. Little dribs and drabs here every once in a while of a mention here. I mean, it's gotten to the point where people look for weight belts and from The Rock in his videos, whether or not they say XFL on them. Danny every once in a while will, you know, tease people with some information. Some of that has come out. Jay Rothman, and, you know, we found out about BCG. They were involved in the CFL talks. So, yeah, they need to do a better job moving forward. I mean, when they're ready to go, when they're ready to put the keys in the ignition and make their announcements, you would expect them to be front and center every day on social media, promoting everything heavily. Once they put the keys, I don't think they're ready yet to put the keys in the ignition.
I just looked at the clock here. We've been going. I promise not to hold you up too much longer. I was like, oh my gosh! I just looked at the clock here. I've been so engrossed in the conversation. Thank you for your time.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Can we dissuade the speculation that there is a trove of coaches and staff and everybody hired right now that, you know, I think I tweeted a couple weeks ago, this isn't going to be like the ending of National Treasure when they open up the treasure vault and there's all of these, you know, because, you know, and we get that a lot. And again, this is what, you know, and I've, you know, I reached out to the XFL media people, you know, they've talked to us, and, you know, when all like we're going to be on the field in months, and then that'll, you know, they're like, I go, yeah, I understand that, you know, you don't have anything to announce or you're taking your time or whatever, but like, you know, one day in social media is like a year of anything now, right? And the silence is deafening. I think had they been more upfront about these talks from the beginning and said like, you know, there is no merger or whatever, you know, because think of all the speculation we've done in the last 4 months, right? For literally nothing, right? Like literally nothing at all. Nothing came of anything. There wasn't anything. And I'm like, God, if anyone would have just said like, hey, actually, this is not what we're doing, or this isn't like, if Danny Garcia had come out and said, well, actually, I meant months as in like, we're still a long way away, not as in we're in months as in like, we're kicking off in 3 months, which is how I read it. But I mean, at least at a minimum, we can dissuade, right? There's no treasure trove of coaches and everybody that's sitting idly waiting for a launch.
Yeah, we can definitely put that to bed. Everyone will start focusing on 2023 now, and they'll talk about. But even a couple of weeks ago, people reached out to me. Some of my colleagues reached out to me and said, "Hey, what have you heard, Mike? I hear 2022 is a go now, and they've already got coaches. The coaches are telling me that they're coming back, and it's already set up. And I had to shoot that down quickly. Yeah, I get it. You have so many. It's great though that a league that only played 5 weeks has so many people that are interested.
Crazy.
In it.
It's crazy.
It's crazy. The league, it tells you something. If you're an outsider and you're wondering what the hell, it tells you something. A lot of the XFL supporters were not even alive for the first iteration, or were too young to even remember it or didn't watch it. And so it's pre-HD era television. So, I mean, there's that. So it's great that there are so many supporters of the league that are still interested in it and that are, doing detective work every day, going on LinkedIn and finding phony XFL employees or all that kind of stuff. So, I mean, everyone is out there looking for any slight change that's on social media. What does this mean? What does that mean? So, I mean, that's great. But yeah, it's just funny. We had I mentioned this at the open of this interview, and I know this has been pretty lengthy, but I can't respond to every single thing that people say to me on Twitter. That opens up a can of worms. Sometimes you have some privileged information. I can't say anything about it. But anyway, there was one response that I got on Twitter from one of my followers, and he follows you as well. And he asked me to like his tweet to identify whether or not there would be no 2022 season. So what did I do? I went in his DMs and I sent him 4 separate messages, and they were the letters LIKE. So he couldn't hold me to it. So, but I appreciate the fact that fans like that are out there and that they still care about this league. It's almost to some people nonsensical that a league played only 5 damn weeks and still has people almost 2 years later or whatever it is now, a year and change later, that are like, I can't wait for this league to come back. When's it coming back? That should tell you something right there.
What is next moving forward here? Whether we're XFL fans, we've made it, 55 minutes in the Mike Mitchell interview here. We're anxious. We're ready to go. XFL news. What is next?
I think by the end of the year, they're going to have to make a significant announcement. That's my opinion. Now they can wait till the new year and announce what we're doing in 2022. But I think whatever plans they had, they're moving forward, and they're going to need to start putting the wheels in play. And I think as we move along in the fall and in the winter, I know that's another long wait for people. That sounds like a long way away, but I think we're going to need to start hearing news about what the league's plans are for 2022 leading into 2023. So whether that be documentary shows, whether or not that be new teams added to the league, whether or not be a couple of relocations in the league, 2 teams maybe moving to Mexico and Canada. So, I mean, whatever it is, the international side is in play 100%. And that's going to be in play for 2023. How that's rolled out exposure-wise and expansion-wise remains to be seen, but that's going to be in play. But until we start seeing big news, people right now have a lot of doubt, and rightfully so. And so I think in the next few months, we need to start, hearing some important and vital information that shows you that the league is alive and pushing forward, whether that be the hiring of a CFO or whatever it may be. They need to start putting the wheels in motion and putting their league together.
Yeah, I think when it all comes together, I think it will be, tremendously exciting. In the meantime, but it is, and I do, and like I've said, and if anyone cares about my opinion at all, but I do talk about this quite a bit. But that vision, I've heard this, documentary shows, and we're doing I don't know that's. I don't know if people want a year's worth of, it's 30 for 30s lead. I don't know. I mean, all I know is, the XFL the first time it had, wasn't great. I mean, they obviously the social media and Bailey and all that, did a good job. But I mean, I remember, I think we had Ryan Gustafson handing off season ticket boxes or whatever to random fans in Pioneer Square for the Dragons. And I was so angry that I knew they were staged because I had one of the first season tickets and I was so angry that I didn't, get one of those. But, I think there's a line in between those two things. But I do wonder that, like, we keep saying, like, we're preparing, they're getting all these things. I'm like, I don't, are we packing for a trip with 16 suitcases? Like, I just don't know. I get that it's a big launch, but I don't know. I don't know. It's fascinating to me. We have this slow rollout maybe of USFL, it was the spring league and the hubs and we're expanding and what are we doing? And then I think like the XFL wants to shoot its load at one time, right? It's like, here's our plan. And I just don't know which one is right. And I'm fascinated to see, because it is like we're seeing two, a mirror image here back and forth.
We might get what I thought we were going to get in 2020, which is the existence of the Alliance of American Football and the XFL at the same time. Be fascinating. The fingers crossed that both these leagues make it and do a great job. So I think it's great for players, because when you're talking about it, if you've got two leagues with 16 teams, you're over 800 players at the bare minimum. So getting jobs, and that's coaches, and then people working for the teams, and then that's people getting media jobs working. So it's great for football if it happens. So it is going to be fascinating to watch the march towards that. I'm curious how the USFL makes things work. And what they do, what markets they choose, what coaches they hire. There's rumors out there about guys like Steve Spurrier and Wade Phillips and Jerry Glanville and others. You're going to have to pay those guys decent coin and make sure those checks don't bounce. So, that's kind of the story there, to get those kind of guys. That would help for notoriety. But, they could be battling each other there, the USFL and XFL. So we'll see. You have to get to the point where you actually pay your players decent money and all that for players to want to play in your league. So anyhow, but it's going to be fun to watch. We got to be patient here with everything, but it's going to be fun as we start rolling closer towards 2022 to see what happens.
Yeah. Mike, this has been, I will send over, I'm sure Paul is having a heart attack right now as I send him the audio file of this as we get going. But, this was a long time coming. We were going to have you on, because I kept saying, like, we'll have him on when there's news. And then it was like, the XFL never really did anything. And so now at least we have. So I'm glad that we got the Band-Aid off. The toothpaste is out of the tube now. We can have you back on again in the future. But it was certainly not for a lack of us talking anyway, just actually, finalizing and getting stuff on here. But I really appreciate an hour of your time here spending with us today on the Markcast.
Thanks, Reed. You guys are awesome. Thank you for having me on.
Thank you. There you go. Well, Farhan, thank you so much for coming on. I am sad to say that this might be the last time that we ever talk now that the CFL, I am kidding, because actually, we were going to have you on this week. I'm very interested in all the training camp stuff, the vaccination protocols, everything else with the CFL. So we're going to do all of that too. So Farhan, we were scheduled. We're going to do all the breaking XFL, CFL stuff now. I'm going to actually break this out as a standalone video today to kind of hopefully get some of the buzz. And then we will add on to this and then put that on our episode on Friday. So if you're checking out the episode today, make sure to subscribe. Come back Friday. We're going to do all the CFL stuff too. Farhan, I'm sure a busy day for you. How are you reacting to all of this news?
Well, surprised at the timing, but not really surprised that we're at this point. I got the sense from people I've been talking to in the last couple of weeks that this might be headed in this direction. It had been pretty quiet for well over a month now, right, in terms of the two leagues and where they're at. And, we were kind of led to believe that it got to a point where they needed to get this to the analysts and see what the actual numbers for this whole thing were going to look like. And I just don't think that they were able to get much in the way of clarity, right? There were still a lot of questions, both financially in terms of what it would look like and logistically, right? In terms of what the league would physically look like, in terms of where the teams would be on the XFL side, in terms of player acquisition and retention. There was a number of things that were still in play, some of which you were going to be able to overcome because that's just part of bargaining and negotiations. But I think on the financial side, there just wasn't a lot of clarity. There was a lot of hope. There was a lot of potential, but there wasn't necessarily a lot of meat on the bone at the front end. And I just don't think there was enough there ultimately for the CFL governors to decide they wanted to jump completely into this. And I think from an XFL standpoint, I think they wanted some clarity as well because of what's happening with the USFL and the fact that the USFL is planning to launch in 2022 with a television deal with Fox. I think they were anxious to kind of have some news and move forward on what they were doing. And ultimately the mechanics of the deal just weren't there where the CFL governors felt comfortable making that leap of faith.
How are you, obviously as someone that covers the league, as a proponent of, growth, how are you reacting to this personally?
Well, I'm disappointed to a degree, right? I think there was some exciting things around what it could have looked like. But again, more than anything, I was excited at the notion that Redbird Capital and The Rock and Danny Garcia and their promotional might could have put the Canadian Football League in really good financial footing, right? But I think during this process, I think what people around the CFL learned was just how much they were bringing to the process, right? And, when you enter this on both sides, you're in the throes of COVID and everything looks so bleak. And then in the last month, things are turning up. Vaccination rates are better. CFL is going to start playing its games again. And as you go through the process, you realize just how much this league is bringing to the equation in terms of its infrastructure. The fact that you've got football teams you've got 9 teams that are up and running. You've got established fan bases. You've got a television deal. So how does that work, right? I mean, at the front end, would the CFL have been expected to turn over half its TV deal, half its sponsorship deals, all of those things in an attempt to get more on the back end, right? I mean, there were just a lot of those types of questions, but I think as much as anything, CFL people who were very open to this at the governor level realized that, look, I think we can be okay. We've got the single game betting coming in now. You've got things like, revenue sharing and other adjustments to the business model that they've been forced to make during COVID and we're going to make long term. So maybe we're in a better position than we think, that we don't need to just do this out of desperation.
Yeah, that's kind of what I think. I mean, we've noticed on the show lately that, as all this single game sports betting talk has ramped up, as the, obviously COVID and everything has cooled down a little bit, that it did seem like this cooled, right? The talks were maybe 4 months ago or, back in October, whenever all this started, that it did seem a little more bleak. Is that kind of your beliefs as well?
Yeah, I think there's some truth to that. And look, I do believe that when the governors got into this at the front end, there was a certain amount of desperation, but, I do think they believed that, look, this league had some financial issues before COVID, right? I mean, you look at a team like the Winnipeg Blue Bombers who made a little bit of money. I mean, a lot went right for the Bombers to eventually win the Grey Cup to only make a little bit of money, right? Now, their numbers are a little bit different because they're also still, there's a new stadium that's just been put in both in Saskatchewan and in Winnipeg. And so their financials look a little bit different when you've got to pay off portions of that. But I think overall, I think there was a feeling that the business model was broken and that, when you look at The Rock and you look at Danny Garcia and you look at Redbird Capital, you see potential and you see glitz and you see glamour and you see things that could potentially bring a lot. So I think they did try to do it from the standpoint of, look, even without COVID, this league had some financial issues in 2019 and before that. So we use COVID to springboard and to take us into an area that maybe we wouldn't have seriously considered before. But, ultimately that wasn't enough and they need a little bit more.
In terms of, I've already seen people commenting, they're putting a pin in this now. They're going to come back, to these, because whatever the statement said, it's put on pause for the time being. Yeah. I mean, do we hop back on the horse here? I mean, I don't really know.
I don't think so. I think today it's over. I believe that. I understand that both leagues put at this time on their press releases, but I think as of today, there's not going to be any need to revisit the discussion. Now, in 3 years, if the XFL is playing football games and the CFL is in a different financial situation and, there's more of a need, you don't know what it's going to look like in 3 years. But I don't believe from the people I've spoken to today that the pause is actually a pause. I think they're moving forward, both entities independently. If there's a reason to come back later, maybe they revisit that, but I don't believe that's part of the plan to put the brakes on this.
The people you've been talking to, are they disappointed? Are they relieved? I mean, obviously I've seen a lot of, CFL fans, relieved with everything.
Yeah. Depends who you talk to. I think there are certain owners that are disappointed, and I think there's some that are probably relieved. I mean, you look at the statement that the Edmonton Elks put out where they said that, we're happy about this and we're happy to preserve this type of, the game that we've got and all of that. So, yeah, I mean, maybe, as a community-owned team with their constituents, maybe they're in a certain place, but there are others that I've talked to that are disappointed. I think they went into this really, really hoping that there would be, a lot more financial meat on the bone, to make this go, right? I think there was a lot of excitement at the potential of this at the front end. So, but at the same time, I mean, there are people who feel better about the CFL situation with the single game betting, with some of the other adjustments that they've made, like we talked about earlier, the revenue sharing and things like that. I think some of those things are going to add immediate franchise value to some teams that are looking for it. So, there's both. But I think as much as anything else on the CFL side right now, let's just get on with 2021. I think that's probably the biggest sentiment that I'm getting right now from the league office, from governors and others.
As someone that I'm now an Elks fan, I didn't know that they were so anti-XFL. I might have to I have my flag here. I might have to really reevaluate that. A couple more questions on this, and then obviously I want to get into the season stuff. We had Rod Peterson back on the show a couple weeks ago, and a lot of our conversation was about really the hostility, right, that kind of came out with these talks, with the fans, with everything.
Not for me.
Well, no, and not from, but from that small, but it's a vocal. Yeah. I mean, that's who I hear. That's who's,
on sure.
Things. And, Rod said the same thing, in our wildest dreams, we never could have imagined it would have gotten so contentious. Right. And I think that maybe, the hires up at both the XFL and CFL maybe didn't anticipate that either, that it would just get the vitriol would be so thick.
Yeah, I don't think that really played a role, but I do believe, and this was always the case from the beginning, there was going to have to be something substantial for those people to go back to their teams and their fan bases and say, hey, listen, this is the better thing to do, right? And, it changes. The temperature changes in different cities, and the temperature also changes with different age groups, right? And who you are. There are people that are going to be protectionist, and they're just not going to want change. They're just not going to want evolution. They're not going to want to look at this with any sort of open eyes, right? It was going to be glass half empty regardless, right? So that was going to be there. But I really don't believe, from talking to those teams, that they experienced a lot of that vitriol firsthand. I don't think there were thousands of fans in Winnipeg and Saskatchewan and even in Edmonton that went to those teams and said, we're out. Were there dozens of upset people? Sure. But were there thousands? No, I don't believe that for a second. So I don't think that had anything to do with it. That said, and I said this again when we were on the first time, was that, yeah, you still have to go back to those people and look those people in the eye and say, this is why we're changing. And you're going to have to give them something tangible, not just hope, in order to tell them why they're changing. And they just couldn't get to that.
Is this the right decision to make ultimately?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, from what I've heard today and where the talks were at, right, and this is not an anti-XFL guy, right? Like, I'm not that guy. So I just think that right now, based on where they are, the XFL has still got a lot of questions to answer internally, right, in terms of where their cities are going to be. Because, I think there's an assumption that you're just going to pick up those 9 teams. I don't know that that's the case. What their TV contract is going to look like, what their infrastructure, what they were left with, right? Because I understand that Redbird and Garcia and The Rock got the assets, but what were those assets, right? I mean, and were they enough to really build full football operations from, right? Because in some cases they were just contracts, right? They weren't necessarily a bunch of computers and pads. I mean, there was a little bit of that, but so, when you look at the actual costs, when the Redbird Capital folks looked at the actual costs to get this off the ground from a staffing and infrastructure perspective through to 2023, and you're going to have to lose millions, tens of millions, hundreds of millions at the front end in order to make the money at the back end. I mean, that's just, they knew that when they launched a few years ago, right? So I think when you look at all of that, I think this is probably the best thing for both sides. Both sides now have some clarity, and they can kind of move forward with it.
Yeah, it's just a shame it took so long. I mean, already I'm hearing, as much as we criticize some of the CFL fan base for being, homers or, holding on,
old school, yeah,
XFL, and I'm like, guys, you have far less of a lineage to be really clinging on to. I mean, I try to, play both sides. Any other thoughts on the XFL stuff before we transition to the CFL at hand?
You know what? I hope it's successful. I really do. I want to see a spring league work. And, there are people, and I was one of these at one point that didn't want to see it work. And not the XFL specifically, but spring football generally. I was just that kind of, forget it. The NFL, it's just never going to happen. But, I just believe that when you look at the numbers, and I think there are enough fan bases that will support it to the point, I use MLS as the example, right? Because really the MLS, it's not necessarily profitable, but there's franchise value. Right? I mean, there's not huge television dollars. There's not huge attendance at the majority of games. Yeah, there are some outliers, but yet somehow they've managed to create a business model that creates franchise value. So I would love to see television ratings, for an XFL be able to sustain NHL type levels in the United States like they showed for their first 5 weeks that they had a season last year. I'd like to see it happen. I think more football is good for everybody. It's more opportunity for coaches, for players, for fans, for gamblers, for everybody. So I just don't see why having something like that succeed is bad. I mean, I think it just forces the CFL to get better. I think this whole exercise forced the CFL to get better. It forced the CFL to take a deeper look at itself. So I hope the XFL works.
I lied. I have one more question. I want your reaction to right when this came out, friend of the show, Rosh Madani tweeted, look at all this wasted time. We spent all this time. We could have rebuilt, the CFL could have worked on all these other things in the meantime. Reaction to that people feel like the last 4 or 5 months, 6 months has been a waste of time?
It's not been a waste of time because of what I just said. I think it forced the league to take a deeper look at itself and what it valued, right? I mean, when the CFL went through its US expansion in the 90s, some people view that as an unmitigated disaster, right? Because those franchises failed. And ultimately Baltimore came to Montreal and that one worked. But as far as U.S. expansion in the States, it failed. I don't believe that whole exercise was a failure because the CFL came out of it much stronger than it had been going into it, right? So you have to look at the big picture. And for me, again, the CFL did work on its business model. They did make some changes just to get on the field for 2021. And so I think a lot of good has come of it. And it's 4 months. Like, really? Right? Like, for an institution that's been around over 100 years, we're going to get all bent out of shape because they took a look at 4 months. The league, the commissioner, the league office, they owed it to themselves. They owed it to their owners. They owed it to their fans to overturn every rock, literally and figuratively, to make sure that there wasn't, a pot of gold at the end of it, right? Like, look at it legitimately. Don't just naysay on everything, right? That's what gets the league into the financial peril it's in now. People refusing to try different things. So I'm glad they tried it. And if this is the right solution, good on them.
Perfect. So we'll clip this off. If you're listening, please tune into the whole show on Friday. I do want to get into some CFL stuff. We talk about you guys a lot, you and Mr. Dave Naylor on the show, and play a lot of clips and stuff, regarding a lot of the player protocols, regarding vaccines, a lot of the retirements and things. What is the biggest story, before this happened this morning, that you were tracking this week, kind of going into training camp starting this weekend?
Well, the retirements have been a big thing, right? You've seen what's happened where, every team has lost a certain number of players for a number of reasons, right? I mean, you could be a veteran player like, Brendan Labatt, who's just like, look, I don't want to deal with these restrictions. I want to spend time with my family for a couple months. Then I'll look at it down the road. And then you've got, some American players that are younger that don't necessarily have as much skin in the game, and they're not making as much, right? They're on minimum deals, 65,000 prorated down from 18 to 14 games. And they don't want to go through it. They might not have their vaccinations. They might not have all their passports and, those types of things dealt with. So just kind of the mechanics around getting to training camp and getting all of that started. The league finally got their PHAC approval. So that's the Public Health Agency of Canada. And they needed to get that formally so that rather than having a 14-day quarantine, they could have a 7-day. So they knew it was coming, but it took to the 11th hour to finally get it in writing formally. But yeah, I mean, just probably more the retirements than anything else, and you've got coaches and players that are just jacked to get it going. And, you've got some others that just aren't excited to have to deal with the restrictions, right? And now the next step is the league is going to try to work on those restrictions and try to get them loosened, so that's the next process that they're going through. So yeah, those are the main things we've been working on. Is
it a lack of, is it just wanting that it's really, the NFL had so much more freedom of, we can postpone games, move all these things around. Is it just a fear of anything happening, or is it that the CFL doesn't necessarily have the resources to maintain kind of two different protocols like the NFL is going into the season?
No, it really comes down to government, right? And the governments have more control here than they do in the United States, right? Money talks, and as most of the U.S. has opened up, they can just do what they want, and we just can't do that here, right? There are travel restrictions, and there are protocol restrictions in every different province. The league itself doesn't want to create a two-tiered system amongst provinces, right? That they don't want to get into, okay, well, Manitoba says you can be double vaxxed and now you can, take everything off at the facility and do whatever you want, and then not have Calgary and BC be able to do the same things, right? So they want to make sure the league is playing on an even playing field, but they needed to go through this step. So we're a little more conservative here, right? When it comes to COVID, you've still got some restrictions in place in various provinces. So the league just wouldn't be allowed to, from a government standpoint, do whatever it wanted like the NFL has done, right? So, there's a process here. So number one process is, can we return to play? Okay, well, we've got that. What's next? Well, how many fans can come? We all know that fans are going to be allowed, but what's the threshold going to be in every province? And then after that, then they go back and say, okay, look, why don't we propose this, that if you're, maybe if a team is vaccinated to 85%, or if a player is vaccinated or what have you, it's going to happen. But there's just an order in which it's got to happen here, that there's just not the same level of freedom that there is in the U.S. for the league to make the decision. Governments make the decision here.
When are we going to hear about like actual numbers of attendance and what's going to be, you know what I mean? Because
I think it'll all happen within by the end of next week. I would be surprised if those numbers weren't all trickling out. It might take a little longer in Ontario, just because that province has more to deal with 3 CFL teams. You've got multiple NHL. You've got Major League Baseball and the Raptors as well, although their season's done, but so they're dealing with a few different things there. So but I would imagine by the end of next week we're going to hear what the capacity is or any restrictions are in any given province. So even in Winnipeg they talk about double vax, so that's great. In BC I know they've thrown out 5,000 as a possible number, but then we've also heard as many as 50% in the stadium, which would be closer to 13,500, 14,000, somewhere in that range. So all those things I think are going to get finalized pretty quick here.
I saw some people floating, and I think Dave Campbell was the most recent one today, that some of these players that maybe are sitting out right now, when things get more lax, that they could be, these like an unretirement of sorts. Is that doable with how short the season is and trying to ramp up?
Yeah, I think it is. And I say that because I think there's going to be a real emphasis on the veteran player, right? The young rookie is not going to get nearly the time because there's no preseason, and teams are allowed to keep extra guys in the taxi squad just so they can deal with COVID protocols. But if protocols get relaxed and those players can come in and maybe do a 7-day or just do a certain amount of testing and they can work their way in, I just think there's going to be a real premium on the veteran player. So, Brendan Labatt, who's a name you've heard of, and we talked about earlier, he's really humble. And he says, I just haven't considered this year as an option because I think some guys are going to take that role. Well, I don't think you're right, Brendan. I think you're too good. And I think that at some point, these other guys aren't going to be able to get the job done and somebody else is going to get hurt. There's going to be a real need. And if they can get you in with a few tests in 7 days and it's September, October, yeah, those players may come back.
Who are you? I think you and Naylor were doing some team breakdowns, right? Looking at, who is looking good, and obviously, training camps and things are still going to happen now. But who do you have your eye on for teams to watch this year?
Well, I think the 2 teams that were in the Grey Cup the last time around have kept the most continuity intact, right? So I really like what Winnipeg and Hamilton have both done. I think Hamilton was the best team in the league in 2019, even though they didn't win the Grey Cup. So I like their roster on both sides of the ball. They got depth at quarterback. They're talented across the board, right? Honestly, I like Toronto. The big thing there is you've got a quarterback that hasn't had a lot of mileage as a starter, and Nick Arbuckle, and McLeod Bethel Thompson's going to get to compete as well. But quarterback's a question mark there. But really, when you look at the rest of that roster, that roster is dynamite. I mean, they're loaded at receiver. They're loaded at defensive line. They've got great players across the board there. They really turned it over from 2019. So I think they're going to be pretty good. Saskatchewan, I think they've done a pretty good job of tweaking and doing what they needed to do with their roster. And then Calgary, even though you look at the roster on paper and, I'm not as impressed as I've been in the past. But by the end of the year, you look at Calgary and they're always right there when the dust settles. So, so I think those are the teams that jump out at me. I think Edmonton's done some good things as well. But the 2 teams that were in the Grey Cup the last time, and I think Toronto, in terms of rosters on paper right now, I think those are my 3 teams I look at closely.
Thoughts? It's a couple weeks from when they released the schedule. We had Jim Mullen on. We did a breakdown, and he brought up a great point. Where there's so many masters to serve, right? COVID protocols, obviously the TV deals, right? What stadiums are available and what days and all this kind of stuff. What are your general take of the schedule, and obviously as someone that works for TSN as well?
Yeah, I mean, there's some weirdness to it, right? You've got Winnipeg and Ottawa that don't get to play at all, and then you've got, I think it's Hamilton and Toronto that are playing, 2 games with 3 days off in the middle, like right around Labor Day. And then you've got Ottawa that has, I think 3 games in 11 days. So there are some quirks to the schedule, but I think we knew that at the front end coming in that eventually they were going to have to be this year. There's always quirks with a 9-team schedule, right? It's never going to be clean. Everybody's going to have something to complain about. But, I look at Ottawa, they probably have it the toughest, but there's a few other ones there that are that are difficult. But like you say, just so many masters. But the biggest one is just trying to squeeze it all into that 14-week window, right?
Any cause of concern or panic? Anything? Obviously numbers and everything are looking good heading in. Anything else that we need to be concerned about before August 5th?
I don't think so. I fully expect August 5th to get going, right? I mean, the big concerns are, what if there's an outbreak? Now, the threshold for outbreaks is a little different, right, than when COVID first began and sports first began, right? I mean, 1 or 2 cases in a hockey team could completely shut you down. Now it'll probably take a little more to shut you down in its entirety just because of vaccinations and things like that. So, I hope we don't see an outbreak. You wonder with this league because the guys just don't get paid as much. Right. So, you might be less worried about breaking the rules if you're a young American player as opposed to if you're a multimillionaire playing in the NFL. Right. I mean, those guys have a little more incentive to stay straight. Right. So, you wonder about that a little bit. But, I think the protocols will also be in a different place. And I'd be surprised if we wound up seeing complete shutdowns as a result of where I expect protocols to be. So unless the Delta variant takes over and runs over every vaccine, I think we're going to be in good shape.
Yeah, it's just tough. I mean, the protocols, you're just asking a lot of the players and some of these, guys to travel up and it is way different when you're on a multi-million-dollar schedule and, being able to chill in a hotel or something than, it's hard. I wish that, I hope that they can kind of get that worked pretty soon here. So.
Yeah, I would agree, and I think that's probably another reason why the veteran piece is going to matter so much to these teams, right? Guys that care about the league, that are invested in the league, that understand the league. I think it'll matter more than ever before just to make sure that everyone's doing their part to get football going up here.
Awesome. Well, I'm sure you've had a crazy busy day. I appreciate you taking the time. I don't want to hold up too much of it, but I did just want to get you on, again, as someone, heading into the season. There are just a few questions, but it does seem like, pretty confident, full steam ahead.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, look, they've done a lot of work, right? And people get frustrated at the CFL because, why aren't we there yet, right? And you get players and you get media that just wanted that guarantee when they just couldn't offer it based on the fans. So it took some time to get to this point. I know the people in charge of their medical committee, they're as good as it gets worldwide. So they're in as good a position as they can be.
Awesome. Well, we are, I think borders and everything now, but we're planning a BC trip, I believe, in the middle of October. And then we will be, God willing, we will be at the Grey Cup in December. So we will join you there. And hopefully, we can continue these talks, even though the XFL may be off the table, we can still, I was going to post something about, well, this is the last week we're covering CFL, but no, we're pot committed now. We're all in and we are excited here for training camps this weekend.
Well, I look forward to hearing from you and hopefully seeing you at Grey Cup. Thanks for having me.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Well, today we have Sammy Gahagan on. I'm very excited for the Montreal Alouettes. I am famously an Elks fan, but after many of the comments they've made this week regarding the XFL things, and we have a lot of friends of the show on the Alouettes, so maybe we'll be switching brand allegiance this year. Sammy, thank you so much for coming on. First off, how are you doing? I know you're on the road.
Yeah, I'm good, man. I'm actually home now, so that's good. I started my busy season coming up here in the next month and a half or so. So I'm enjoying the little bit of free time. Well, the little bit of last of the free time. We finally can start working and getting out there. So it's I'm excited to get moving and get out on the road and see all my colleagues and do all that kind of stuff. So it's exciting.
So, I mean, what's the last couple of months been like for you? I mean, you're obviously a scout, trying to do all this, we don't really know what's going on. I mean, what's it been like for you?
Yeah, it's been a lot. It's been different. It's I went from being on the road, when I was with Saskatchewan and BC, I was on the road August. I was gone every weekend until pretty much end of January. I'm always traveling to schools and visiting and games and all-star games and weeks. And, it's been different sitting home and having to, watch film. And I'm an evaluator. I like to be in person. I'm not a big film guy. I like to see everything in person. I like to, body type things. And, I write pretty descriptive reports. So I like to be out there and seeing kids. And it's been tough for a guy like me, per se, that has to sit home and now watch film and decide whether or not a guy's good or not, or has the ability to play in our league. So it's been a challenge, but, it's slowly gotten back to normalcy as much as we can, I guess, at this point. I live in Florida, and I tell everybody, I don't think COVID came here, man. We've been full go since this thing started. So, a lot of people have a lot more restrictions than we do. And I just been kind of Floridians just sit here and just say, we don't, COVID didn't come to Florida, man. We've just been keep moving, so it's challenging, but we're getting back to normal. So that's good.
When you're looking for players, for CFL teams, are there specific things because of the league there, because of the way the rules run, because of the size of the fields and things that you're looking at compared to maybe it would be for another league?
Yeah, as we've got a ratio. So there's some positions that we don't use, because I'm in the U.S., I'm in the States. So some positions are designated already for Canadian spots. So there's a lot of positions I don't even evaluate. I don't even look at them. There's some that I do that we don't carry, because sometimes I'll look at, like, for instance, tight ends. We don't use tight ends usually as Americans, but I'll look at tight ends to see if I can flip one to defensive end. So I watch their movements. I try to see athletic ability. I don't spend a lot of time on it. If it doesn't flash at me, I don't spend a lot of time on it, to be honest with you, while I'm at a game or walking around pre-game evaluating and body typing. So there's a lot of positions I don't even look at. I don't look at fullbacks. I don't look at interior alignment unless it flashes that I think they can move outside. So it's different, and it's crazy because I'm with all NFL scouts that are in the box with me or on the field with me, and they're always telling me, "Hey, you got to look at this guy." And I'm like, it sounds good. He won't fit in what we do. So, it's different. I tell people we evaluate different. I'm not looking at the first round pick. I'm looking at the guy that's a fringe free agent guy, late round pick. I don't spend a lot of time on, Tua, and those kinds of players and Josh Fieldses and I just don't, so I live on the, like I always tell people my biggest claim to fame was Toby Antigua and Kyron Moore, and Kyron was, I didn't even go there looking for Kyron, to be honest with you, but he had a great game in front of me, and the rest is what it is. We gave him an opportunity, and he's doing what he's doing in the league now. So.
Yeah, CFL News that helps me kind of, who are some people we should talk to? They had wanted to make sure that you got the Kyron Moore story out there. They said that there was a good, interesting tidbit about that. Yeah.
So I was at the UCF. So they weren't even supposed to play Austin Peay. Something happened, and UCF had I think a hurricane had come in. They had lost the game. They were looking for a game late. It just happened to be Austin Peay said, "Hey, we'll take that game." And so Austin Peay came to UCF. It was during the UCF national title season. So Austin Peay came in, and Coach Jones, I was working for Saskatchewan at the time. And Coach Jones, I said, "Hey, I'm going to go see Austin Peay." He said, "Hey, man, I'm friends with Coach Healy, who's the head coach there now, who's now at Charlotte, I believe now." He said, "If you go on the field when you're going there and tell him, that you work for me, and tell him, him and I know each other." So I'm pre-game and I see Coach Healy. I go up to him, introduce myself, tell him who my boss is. And he's running me down through these players. And then he goes, "Hey man, by the way, there's a kid out here, number 4, Kyron Moore. I think he was hurt or something, and he hadn't done much at that time. And that season. And he's like, just watch this kid. He's special." So I walked over to him and I was body typing. I'm like, another, 5'8", 5'9" receiver who's, we always say as scouts in the CFL, we can find those anywhere. So I was like, all right, I wrote them down quickly. I didn't pay a lot of attention to it, to be honest with you. And that's just the honest truth of it. Because he had some other guys I was thinking that I could look at. And I was there looking at the UCF kids anyway. So I'm in the booth and I have Danny McManus sitting next to me, who's an assistant general manager. And I don't know if you know, I'm sure you do, but, we have a neg list in our league where you can, put kids on the neg list and protect them, I don't have that. I was just like my second year in. I didn't have access to that list or anything. So I had a channel. I had to call somebody and he had to call somebody. Like it was a 4-person channel to get somebody placed on that list for me. So we get up to the booth and I'm sitting next to Danny, who can just text it in from his phone. We can email it right in. So we're sitting there, and I just remember Kyron I just remember his first play, took a kickoff back, and he almost took it to the house on his first one. And I was like, oh, God, who's this? And now my binoculars are on this kid, number 4. I'm watching him almost every play. So I kind of take my phone out, and I just kind of turn to the side because Danny was to my left. And Danny's a good friend of mine. And I just kind of turned over, and I just started texting Coach Jones. And I said, and I kept writing 911. Put this kid on now. I go, Danny McManus is right next to me. He's looking at the same thing. I'm like, just do. And I just kept 911, 911. I must have said that 15 times before I got a reply. And he's like, all right, I'll do it. And that's how we got him. So we put him on the neg list. And then I got his phone number like a month later. I shot him a text and I said, hey man, we'd be interested in working you out. And can you get to? He's from Bessemer, Alabama. He was living. We had a workout in Montgomery, and I said our head coach wants to see you. He went to the workout, and he was the best guy there. And he's Kyron Moore. He's Swerve now. he was tiny in college, and they named him Swerve. I think, if I'm not mistaken, I want to say it was Deron Carter who named him Swerve at Saskatchewan, and that's how he's known now throughout the league. And he's an awesome kid, man. To be honest with you, not only is he a great player, which is awesome, but he's a phenomenal kid. I mean, it's just he's always got a smile. He's just so excited to be there, man. He's just one of those kids you want him to do well because he's just so excited to be there. I don't think he'll ever understand his true value and his true worth just because he's so humble. But man, he's just a great kid. I love it. We still talk, he'll call me, he'll text me, how you doing? Always messaging me, if he sees something on social media. Just a great kid, man. He's just a really great kid. So I was happy that it worked out for him.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, you got to make sure we get that on there. That's 911. Talk about, and you mentioned a little bit about, you like to be in person, not a big, tape person. How challenging was it, especially with the layoff, with all the crazy stuff that happened, with the drafts and players and, all the different craziness leading into this year compared to other years with scouting for the CFL?
Yeah, I mean, I had, believe it or not, I had to call Coach Jones, and because to be honest with you, I don't do a lot of film evaluation. I'm an in-person guy. I go to schools, I do visits. And then, when we were with Coach Jones, we were doing so many workouts for free agents that we would always see guys. And Chris was actually he's kind of, was my mentor as far as looking and evaluating. And if you ask anybody in the league, he's one of the best. So I had a really good coach. Between him and Mike Davis being, together, and Mike and I have been friends for a long time as well. When I first came into that thing, all I knew was going and seeing kids. So I don't like to do a lot of film because I'm a football player. I played football. I've been in the grind. I understand what it's like. And, I just feel like I got to see, I have to have my eyes in. Chris was the same way. He's like, I got to see him. And there was times where I would call him and say, hey, this is a guy. He's like, dude, we got to see him first. And he wouldn't move on a kid unless he saw him in person. So I kind of adopted that kind of mentality where I got to see him. I got to see him in person because I can't tell you how many emails we get or texts we get all the time from either players or agents. They're all 6'2", they're all 220, and they all run 4.4s. So it's important for us, to say, hey, we got to start seeing these guys and timing them and measure them ourselves. So, after my first year at Saskatchewan, those guys never went to pro days. So, after the first year, they didn't pay me to go either. I just said, I said, Chris, hey, I'm just going to go, man, because I feel like it's a good opportunity for me to go and be around the NFL guys and listen. He said it was my first year in scouting. I said, but also I can, see these kids in person. Well, let me tell you, I went to my first year. I did, I think, 4 pro days in the state of Florida. I just went to 4, and I got so much information. We ended up having workouts. I ended up getting my first workout for Chris in a free agent workout. I had probably 50 to 100 kids here. And it was all from the information I got from those pro days. After that year, I told Chris started paying me. And the next year I did 24 pro days in almost 30 days. So I drove to Atlanta. I had a hub in Atlanta. I stayed in my family's place in Atlanta. I drove to Nashville and I just worked my way back to Florida, and I hit 24 schools in 30 days and just evaluating, measuring. So we had all our own numbers. I was putting everything into the computer. We had everything we needed, contact. They were so powerful. So that's another thing that we used to do. And I just told Chris, man, because I don't know. I'm not a good evaluator of film. Like I can't, honestly, I don't know if my attention span or something just doesn't allow me to sit here and do this. That's why I was never a good coach. I never claimed to be a good coach. I'm a visual guy, man. I like to see it and touch it. I'm tangible, and that's just how I do it.
No, I love it. And fascinating and the work and everything that goes into that, right? To really, to first year and to do all that. I mean, it shows. And obviously, the players that you attract and find could be diamonds in the rough for people that maybe you wouldn't get a look at otherwise. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah. Toby Antigua is a great example of that. It's talking about a guy who was a receiver his whole life, a receiver. Never even sniffed the defensive side of the ball. We're at a workout. There was about 9 guys there. And there was I think 4 offensive linemen, one of which after that workout got signed by the Green Bay Packers, and we had no defensive linemen. So after Toby's workout, he didn't run very well for some reason. He did, he had an okay workout, but we weren't going to sign him as a receiver. So Coach Jones says, "Hey, I need somebody to rush the passer." And Toby's like, "Hey, I'll do it." Just puts his hand in the ground, goes up against a guy who just went and started games right after that for the Green Bay Packers and dusted him. And literally the first rep, he just dusted him. Coach and I were standing behind the defensive line. We both look at each other, and the coach goes, "Man, you can't teach that kind of pass rush, man." And I said, "Dude, that's unbelievable." He's like, "He's playing out of because I do a great Coach Jones impression." He goes, "Man, he's playing out of position, man. He's a defensive end." I said, so he's like, after the workout, I tell Toby, he goes, "Hey, put on 30 pounds, come back and see me in a month, and I'll work you out as a defensive end." And boom. Toby Antigua, Rookie of the Year.
One of the reasons I'm excited to talk to you about the Alouettes, it's weird for us, getting into this podcast, covering these leagues, right? We cover the spring league, we cover fan control football, all these different things. And then when some of the players that have been on the show, friends of the show, go on, I know that we have Cole Boozer, formerly the XFL. He played in the spring league this year, been on the show. Matt Mengel, spring league as well. I know they're both, obviously in quarantine right now, going into training camps. You said you're familiar with both of those players a little bit. Thoughts on either one of them? Because it is when they announced the signings, they were heading up there, so excited for us, just as, obviously it's like our little babies, we're sending off.
Yeah. I mean, listen, I'll tell you, I know who the guys are, and I know Mengel was the coach of the staff here really liked him. I mean, he was a guy that they really wanted, and not just like 5 minutes ago. I think they've had their eye on him for a while. So I know that they were super excited to get him. I tried my hardest. I have some other kickers, but the thing that separates him is he does both. And so in our league, you have to kick and have to punt because we don't keep one and the other usually unless they're Canadian. But if you're an American kicker and you can do both things, kick and punt and kick off, I mean, you could write your own ticket in our league, but he's good at it, and he was a name that they were really excited about bringing him in and seeing what he could do. So I'm excited to see how he fares, and I know he had a good spring league, so I know the staff is pretty excited that he's there, and they can't wait to see him compete. And then Boozer, offensive lineman, I think from Temple, right? So my brother actually coached a kid in high school that went to Temple and played with him. So I've been watching Temple football for a long time now, for probably the last, I would say 10 years. I've been secretly a big Temple, Al, follower. And I always, believe it or not, every time Temple comes down here to play either UCF or USF, that's a game I always throw on the schedule just because I'm secretly a Temple guy. So I've seen him play as well, and he's another one. He's athletic and big, and those guys, he fits exactly what we're doing. And not for nothing, with all the retirements happening, and we don't know how it's going to go. Day to day, we're getting a surprise. So, guys like that who just come in and think that they're just a camp guy or think they have an opportunity, now they really have a legit chance because, guys are, they're just choosing another path right now. So, I think he's going to do well, to be honest with you. I wouldn't be surprised if he's not on that roster. But, all we can do is give them the opportunity. It's up to them at that point. Once they get there, it's all about them.
Absolutely. We cover obviously spring league, a lot of these things, and the narrative is always, there's only so many spots in the NFL, CFL, these other leagues giving players the opportunity, right? Getting some more tape. Talk about the value, if any, of having the spring league and things to be able to, get that tape and that watch those reps that maybe the players wouldn't get otherwise.
Yeah, I think anytime you have an opportunity to get the camera on you, I think it's a great, it could be in the spring league, could be in the, IFL, whatever, just for me, it's all about, being able to have people see you play, whether it's on film or in person. So anytime you can take an opportunity to do that, I always think it's great because we always tell people you only need one person to like you. There's 32 NFL teams. You only need one guy to like you. There's 9 of us. You only need one to like you. So, any chance you can get, and sometimes a lot of kids don't want it because I think in the spring league you got to pay, and a lot of kids just, agents they shy away from it because, the agent is I always tell people agencies, it's a business. So agents are in the business of making money. They're not into losing, and sometimes they don't want to pay. And a lot of kids don't have that opportunity. That's why in our league, though, the free agent camps are huge. And I think that's a good thing that we provide for those kids is another opportunity to get in front of a lot of people. But the spring league for sure has been great, man. I think they've signed a ton of people, and they've signed kids to the NFL. And don't get me wrong, there's far and few between. There's not a lot of kids that are signing, but a lot of kids are getting their opportunities, and that's because they've taken the chance and they've bet on themselves. And that was one thing that Chris always taught me. These kids bet on themselves, man. If they want to come work out for me, they can do it, and they'll have an opportunity just like everybody else. So, I hope they keep it up. The CFL is, we're going into our 108th, 108 this year. We're going to be around for a while, man. So, a lot of people, it's so funny. A lot of people think that, I can just go to the CFL, but no, you can't just go to the CFL, man. I've been around Coach Jones where I was with him when we worked out Terrell Owens on the field. Like we worked out T.O. to work out to play for us, and he didn't sniff it. I mean, he's told first round draft picks no thank you before in the NFL. So, we're competitive, and we just like the NFL, we look for the best. So if you're the best at what you do, we're going to give you an opportunity.
Yeah, I was looking here. I was talking Derek Dennis online earlier, kind of going back and forth, talking about some of the problems, and I obviously want to get into the XFL stuff here at the end, but this perception that maybe the CFL has allowed for a while that their players maybe aren't as good, right? And they haven't marketed them as such, even though they are. Why do you think that is, and why do you think it hasn't been taken care of and kind of been perpetuated?
Yeah, honestly, I don't know, to be honest. That'll probably be an age-old question that never really has an answer to it. We're as competitive as the next. I mean, shit. We just had Alex Singleton go and just dominate in the NFL. Sammy Gahagan a year ago is another one. I mean, we could go down the list. Jarrell Freeman's a Canadian guy. Delvin Breaux. I mean, we can, like I said, we can go Deion Lacey. If I sat here, I could just rattle off names in the last 5 years of guys that have come to our league and then gone to the NFL. And Sammy Gahagan's a great. He never went to the NFL. He came right to Canada, and then boom, 2 years in or 3 years in, and right to the Miami Dolphins. So, I don't know. I always told people Canada for me was a place you could either rehab your image, rehab your injury, and get film. But I also say it's a great place to come up there, and you can have a phenomenal career and make good money and be successful and set yourself up down the line. And it's good football. I mean, you see it. I mean, we put it out. We're probably Nate Holley. I'm not all the names are popping in my head now. Like we continually put 10, 15, 16, 20 guys in the NFL every year. So, or at least they're getting opportunities. So I don't know why they think that. I mean, we have great. Derek Dennis was phenomenal. He's another Temple guy, if I'm not mistaken. We just got good players, man. It's just competitive as the next league, as far as I'm concerned.
So, obviously, and I did at least want to get your thoughts on this today. News of the week, right? The XFL, CFL, merger that's not a merger. Thoughts on that, reactions before we let you go.
Yeah, I got to be careful here. So, man, I think the CFL, we have enough to worry about right now in our own league. So, we've had a tough time getting on the field. So, I'm actually kind of glad the distraction's gone for me. I think it's time that we focus on our own league at this point. We're trying to, this kind of came about and,
it's okay. You're good. I mean, you can say what you feel. Say what you feel. I don't. Yeah, I take
which was that easy. Yeah, like I said, I'm glad the distraction's gone. I'm glad we can focus on the CFL and get our league going, get our fans, excited about football again, and they're going to be so excited. To be honest, and the league it's a great league, man, and. Our fan base is so strong and they can't wait. And I can't wait. I mean, we become fans now, even as personnel guys, because we haven't been on the field in almost, we're going to go on a year and a half now. So, I'm glad, like I said, it would have been nice to have, more, with that, it created more jobs. It would have done a lot of stuff that way. But, our focus in the CFL should be on the CFL at this point, trying to get ourselves on the field and play ball. And I think that's what we're doing right now. And we got a target for August 5th, and that's what we're doing.
Yeah, I've been, obviously reading a lot of opinions and stuff from a lot of journalists the last, day and a half now. And it does feel like, for every set, and I know that a lot of our listeners or XFL fans are frustrated too, right? That maybe time could have been spent elsewhere, but I think it raised the interest in everything. I mean, it certainly gave us a lot to talk about for the last 4 months. So,
well, this is going to be the third time the XFL's trying to fire up here. So, I mean, how much more, how much more can they try to do? I mean, it'd be great if we had and I don't think the CFL, a lot of people say CFL is a developmental league. It's not a developmental league at all. It's a bona fide league that's been here longer than the NFL. It's not going anywhere. So, but the spring league, whatever, I think if the football could find a way to have a AAA or a farm system of players that you could just go and find guys that there's so many players walking on the street right now that can't get an opportunity for whatever reason. If they could figure out a way how to do that, and make a partnership with the CFL and the NFL to go and get players out of there. So these guys are constantly playing, I think that would be great, but like I said, third time you're trying to fire up. I don't know what else can you do in this XFL. I don't know.
Oh, and I mean, believe me, because I don't have a horse in the race, right? I mean, at this point now, we've kind of been there, but even like yesterday, they updated like the Twitter handle, and now it's XFL 2023, right? Because it was XFL, and it's like, okay, well, do they have 2024 going? Do they have 2025? I'm like, we got. I mean, because I get it too. I'm like, this is getting a little scary. It's getting a little worse.
And listen, they got a lot of people that were interested. I mean, I thought that when it originally came out, I thought it was going to be a good, big hit. So for whatever reason, this thing can't stay, on the track for whatever reason, and hopefully they can get it together. Everybody loves football, so anytime you can have football on the field and quality players, it's great. Think about back when Rocket Ismail was coming out and he came to the CFL rather than go to the NFL. I mean, that did so much for the Canadian football game. And then think about all the players that came to Canada after that. I mean, you had Doug Flutie, Danny McManus, Warren Moon, Ricky Williams came. I mean, all these big names came up to Jeff Garcia, another big one came up there. And, if they can find a way to get that done, I think people will follow. So we'll see what happens. I wish them luck. And, like I said, I love to see football on the field. So we'll see what happens there.
Any thoughts on the USFL relaunch that was just announced?
Yeah, no, I mean, when they get on the field, that'd be great. I don't know too much about the USFL other than I used to have their set of cards back in the day with Herschel Walker and those guys. And I actually have the whole set, the original USFL set of cards. And I always say, and my brother owns it, but I always say it's mine. So we have that set. That's the only thing I know. So I used to try to sneak that Herschel Walker card out of there all the time, and he used to come after me after that. But that's all I got for that.
Well, Sammy, I'm so glad we could do this. Like I said, obviously there's players that we've tracked in kind of a bunch of different leagues, but a bunch of different teams. But I'm glad, especially with the Alouettes, we get you on. I'm going to have my eyes peeled at all the kind of social media here through training camps and kind of make sure what's going on. Anything else before we let you go?
Man, we're excited, man. We ended 2019 very strong, and we were excited for 2020. We got a lot of the nucleus back. We picked up a lot of good guys in free agency, so we're ready to go, man. The Owls are going to be pretty good this year, and we can't wait to show everybody what we're doing, and hopefully we can bring the cup to Montreal, and that's our focus. And I'm excited to see our guys go after it, and hopefully Vernon and Kahari can take us to the next level, which I believe we can. And like I said, we finished strong in 19, and we're going to continue to build on that. So. It's not a Toronto's East like everybody thinks. So I just want that to be said.
That's good. I like
not Toronto or Hamilton. The Owls are coming back. I promise.
That's good. Well, Sammy, thank you so much again. We're looking forward to this season, and I think it's going to be a lot of fun. And I'm glad that we can get you on here, kind of, and we'll see. Maybe we'll have to call you back here depending on how the Alouettes are doing this year, and we'll get you back on.
Hopefully, I don't look stupid at the end of this.
Yeah.
Thanks for having me, man. I appreciate it.
Thanks.
Welcome back. What a great lineup of guests Reed was able to hold down while I was stuck in various, exams and what have you, checking out my brain. As you can tell, I'm kind of getting back on my A game now. So, I
asked Paul off camera if he was drinking before the podcast. He said no, he's just fired up. So
I haven't had a drink. I haven't had my Adderall. Things are working the way they're supposed to work. Finally. So that gives me some hope. So let's
yeah.
What, you got something to say?
Oh no, I was just gonna say. So I hope Rob Vanstone's listening this week. If not, assuming he listens every week on this wonderful walk with this dog. I was actually going to ask Rob to come on this week to talk about this article that he wrote. Maybe we'll do it next week, but it's related to the XFL. But I got rid of all that now because it's really just talking about the CFL. And the tagline was, "It's time to sell the CFL." Now that they're returning to the game, the league and its 9 teams must sell the league more vigorously than ever, which is, again, that's the thing. We're done with the XFL. So this is it's all on you again. And just to finish my last thought about the merger stuff, because we're moving on. I saw a lot of comments that said, oh, thank goodness we're done with the XFL talks so we can get back to growing our game. And I asked politely, I go, so what was stopping you? Why weren't you able to grow your game while also talking with the XFL, or before you were talking with the XFL, or 5 years ago before you were talking with the XFL, or Ian? But you see some of these quotes here that Rob is talking about getting a lot more media and a lot more transparency, things we're talking about.
Call Braden up. He's got some great ideas to get you out there on social media. Hire Braden, give him $100,000, pay him more than the players get paid, and let him help you direct your social media and grow the game with the millennials and Gen Z. What do you think? Hey, speaking of games, how about a flipping video game? What do you think about that? That's a great idea. Call up EA Sports. Call up the people that do MLB The Show. It doesn't matter. Do that. You shouldn't have to take a flipping merger to get you to care about marketing your flipping league. This is ridiculous.
Yeah, I want to get Rob on. I think Rob's going to be, I have a feeling Rob's going to get fired up about this. But, I like what Rob's saying here. Enough lip service, enough platitude, enough nonsense, talking about talking. Sell the game relentlessly so. Engage with fans and reporters with every opportunity. Paul got so animated he unplugged the microphone from the computer. Ambrosi had a quote, we want to be able to talk about football every day from today going forward. He said June 14th. In fact, I'd like for you guys to see a lot less of my mug and a lot more of our great coaches and great players in the days to come. Again, I just like what Rob's saying here. There's a lot of stuff that we've been, echoing for a long time about transparency. And now that we don't have to worry about the XFL and NDAs, right? I think we could be a little more.
Yeah, let's get more of those guys flipping over and dunking Oreos in a backflip. Get 400 people that could do that. Why not?
So a couple things, a couple notes. So there's been a little bit of confusion about the training camps, where they're being held, right? Obviously, they're letting the players know. The fans aren't going to be allowed into the training camps, right? And the media is going to be severely limited. And I've heard many reporters, Canadian reporters, lamenting that fact of like, well, who are we going to trust telling us like how good players are looking or not, right? I think Rod on his show today was like, well, everyone's going to look good if it's the team reporting this. But Paul, this just came in tonight. This is Claire Hanna. She reports for the Rough Riders. GM Jeremy O'Day, I'm not laughing. This is a terrible thing to laugh about. Jeremy O'Day, GM of the Rough Riders, confirmed today 4 players suffered Achilles injuries at training camp today, and they're all long-term injuries for the Rough Riders.
Season ending.
He says he's never seen, this just came out before we were getting ready to record tonight. O'Day has never seen anything like this in his career. He goes, quote, "We wanted to slowly ramp up the players. I think maybe you're seeing a little bit of the effects of the layoff of this, what's happening. But this wasn't even like full training camp. This was just like slowly getting the players up to speed to like get ready for training camp on Saturday."
Now, what do you think is going to happen on Saturday when training camp starts?
Well, that's insane.
You don't want that to happen. You don't want that to happen. You don't wish that on anybody. A former athlete wouldn't want that on anybody.
No,
but
it's terrifying.
It's terrifying.
I just saw that and I was like, holy, four Achilles injuries the first day of anyway, I'm sure a lot more of that's going to come out. The Rough Riders, they're doing their single game tickets are going on sale. They think that they're on pace to break the 2019 sales that are happening. The last time they were able to do this. The big thing to keep in mind with the ticket sales is all the season tickets, and we've talked about this before, all the season tickets got rolled over to this year. So the only actually new money they're making is, new single game tickets being sold. And then obviously like merch and soda and pop and, like beer and stuff at the stands. But, a lot of that money, they've already moved over those millions of dollars of season tickets into next year. But Miriam Johnson, the director of marketing, is very excited that they're jumping back in and, getting Saskatchewan back together after everyone was apart for so long.
Single game betting is going to save it all.
This was interesting. This was from the Saskatoon Star Phoenix. They polled 400 Saskatchewan residents. To what degree do you agree or disagree that proof of vaccination should be required to attend large gatherings? 61% said they strongly or somewhat agree, and 37% said they either strongly or somewhat disagree. 2% declined. So 61% saying that they feel like you should have a proof of vaccination to attend a Saskatchewan Rough Rider game.
I mean, those numbers are probably better than what you would ask our people down here in America. See, Canadians, you guys do some things right. You guys tell everyone to listen to the science. And I think your numbers would probably be better if you held that poll in most states that are leaning a certain direction, not political, but leaning a certain direction. You would have the flip. You would have the inverse of that. Like 61% would be like, no, my body, my choice. And I'm not going to show you no vaccine passport. So hats off to you guys for getting that one right.
Yeah, this is interesting. We've had some more retirements. If I'm reading this correctly, we've had 3 offensive linemen retire from the Red Blacks. So we've had Alex Mateus, Nolan McMillan, and then also Alex Fontana. They've all said they aren't going to play. The last one was per AJ Jakubek, who's been on before. Again, I was like, wait, there was 2, and then there was another story, but it looked to me like 3 separate, somewhat star offensive linemen for the Red Blacks are all leaning towards retirement.
Because they're not getting paid enough,
and the restrictions,
regular jobs.
Yeah, the restrictions are quite. They said that Mateus, I'm pronouncing that right? Mateus, Mateas.
Hopefully, sorry, Alex. God bless you for getting your name wrong. We're trying.
And McMillan are arguably Ottawa's 2 best Canadian offensive linemen. Both retired. That'll leave a massive hole. I mean, it's it's crazy. And then Jason Lauzon Seguin from the Seguin is retiring. He's another key, O lineman. He was with the Alouettes, and he just basically didn't show up for training camp. That he was with signed. He was with the Red Blacks, and then he signed as a free agent for the Alouettes in February, and then basically just didn't show up.
Unfortunate. There's gonna be more. This is not the end of this. There's gonna be more. So.
I don't know if you saw any of this. Did you see anything about Brian D. Edwards?
No, I did not.
I thought this was really remarkable, and this is a positive I really would take from the CFL. So Brian, passed away. He was a super. Just a super fan, right? He was with Edmonton, super fan, someone that, really engaged online and the games and all that stuff. He unfortunately passed away. This came out from the Turf District, they're the Edmonton podcast. But what spoke to me was I saw this everywhere. Like I saw, Dunk and Hodge and Arash and Farhan, like everyone, like this guy. And I did think like that really spoke to, like when we had Jeff Hamilton on and he goes, this is like the People's League. This is, we want everyone to be involved. This really spoke to me just of that, like of how, not that obviously, condolences to his, him and his family and everything, but that this league would be so tight in those ways. Right. And I guess that speaks to why, like, rightfully or wrongly, they're so hesitant about like people like you and I, like, how dare we, talk about the CFL, but I thought that this was interesting that rest in peace, but that he was so loved in that community. Do you get what I'm saying?
I get what you're saying completely. And hopefully, and I mean, that's, I think people like that joining their community that are so well loved and respected, even though maybe it might have been a like contentious beginning period. Who knows? I don't know the history there, but it would be nice to have a bigger community like that that can embrace one another. And
you mean contentious with us joining that one day?
No, I'm just saying in general, like maybe it's been contentious in the past. I'm not sure the history, and I'm not trying to like, bash the guy on his way, that now that he's passed away. I'm not sure how, I would hope that given this general vibe around this person passing away, that eventually there's a community vibe that like can welcome others in. I don't know.
Yeah. I just thought it was fascinating. I was just trying to see here if they had anything about, the reason why he passed. I don't see anything on the article, but it was just a tremendous loss for that. A couple other notes, I guess, and I was talking to Dorothy's father about this at dinner tonight. The Blue Jays are eyeing July 30th for homestand games. This is a report for Toronto.
Good luck. I mean, why would you look? The Blue Jays are, they're in third right now, and I'm not happy about that. But if you're playing well in the States, why fix something that isn't broken? Like you have a great young core of players. I keep hitting this button for some reason. I keep hitting the.
Paul keeps getting excited and pulling the microphone out of the computer.
You have this great young core of players. Stay in the States and see how well you can do down here in the States.
Well, you'd imagine the fans, right? Wanting to get revenue from fans and wanting to get fans in the stadium. Do they? I mean, but I guess MLB isn't the CFL. They don't need fans.
Well, a lot of people have told us here on this podcast that the Major League Baseball is dying sport. So,
final sad note, I probably should have included this with the Brian Edwards before, but the Montreal Alouettes, this came out tonight too. Michael Souls, he is a former fullback with the Alouettes. He passed away from with Lou Gehrig's disease at 54. This just came out today as well. So obviously condolences as well to him and his family.
All right. We're going to take another break. Come right back. We're teasing some more XFL stuff. You got some DJ Walker notes, Redbird news, of course. And we got a box to open up.
Yeah. And we have a correction. We made a goof. So we have a correction coming up.
That's all coming up after the break. Welcome back. Hey, Reed, your favorite NFL team got fined $10 million. Yikes.
What are they doing over there in Washington football team?
This actually happened before the name change stuff happened. So it's very interesting to see what's going on. They've added Tanya Snyder. They named her the co-CEO this week. Dan Snyder's wife, I believe it is. Yep.
But he's like the one that's the problem. Like that's why it's weird. Like he's the one that's the problem.
Yeah, he is totally the problem.
And then they bring in his wife to be the co-CEO.
Incredible. Moving on, Panthers article from the Panthers have interviewed PJ Walker, apparently.
Yeah, this is first off, we talk about Washington football because Taylor Heineke is on there, and then we talk about the Panthers because PJ Walker's on there. But PJ Walker was interviewed by the Panthers, not their newspaper, but like their social media people.
That means he's staying around. He says about, the off-season upheaval. He says, we know it's a business at the end of the day, so, anything can happen. I know that from being in this building and being in other buildings day in and day out, you have to be ready for any kind of change. At any point in time, you have to be ready to compete no matter what. As long as I get to come in the next day and compete, that's all I want, to show these guys why I'm here. Interesting enough.
They had an interview with Will Greer as well, but I don't care about Will Greer because he didn't play in the XFL. But I just thought that was interesting. That, PJ Walker, we got the PJ Walker side. They did note that he led the Panthers to victory against the Lions. So let's not forget the fact that PJ Walker accounted for 20% of the Panthers' victories last year. PJ Walker was at the helm.
Never forget.
Never
Never forget about that. That's all we got. Per Adam Schefter, the East-West Shrine Bowl, the nation's oldest college football all-star game, is partnering with the NFL and moving the event to Las Vegas, Allegiant Stadium, the Giant Roomba. As part of NFL Pro Bowl week, the game will be Thursday, February 3rd in primetime on NFL Network. That's according to Eric Galco, former XFL Director of Player Personnel.
No, Eric, this is why it's important, is because people go, why do we care about the Shrine Bowl? Why do we care about the East-West Shrine Bowl on the XFL on the Markcast? We care about it because I was just at Allegiant Stadium. I just was down there. If you follow me on Twitter, I was just there. I stood up front of the Raiders store. But then Eric Galco was the former director of player personnel for the XFL, and now he is the director of football operations at the East-West Shrine Bowl.
Oh, okay. That makes sense. I thought it was attributing it. I'm so
per
sorry.
Adam Schefter. Yes.
Yeah,
anyway,
okay.
So there you go. But that's good. Good for Eric Galco. Remember the whole episode when we couldn't figure out what Eric Galco was the director of in the XFL, and it turned out that he was the director of all the player personnel. The final Red Birdie note today, because Redbird recently bought into the Rajasthan Royals, taking a 15% stake. The IPL cricket is more valuable to Disney Plus than the Star Wars franchise. That's what they're.
I call BS on that. I know cricket's huge there, but I don't know if it's Star Wars huge.
Well, maybe not after the last Jedi. Maybe it was, and then maybe let's blame Ryan Johnson for that one. Anyway, but Redbird gets in all these write-ups. They're talking about that it's going to be worth double when they reevaluate their contracts next year, and that the IP they'll be able to double their rights this time around.
Very cool.
Okay, Paul, we made him. Okay, so here's the deal. So people send us stuff, and then they sent, and the USFL. We talked about the USFL LinkedIn page last week. I'm never looking at LinkedIn ever again. I hate LinkedIn. It wasn't the right USFL page. I was in Vegas. It's not an excuse. It's just a reason. Someone sent me the stuff, and I didn't cross-reference, so that wasn't the right. It's in the same. In the same breath where we're making fun of Brian Woods for updating the LinkedIn profile. I mean, it was kind of a joke. But anyway, the guys over at Fourth and Long emailed me about that. They already know. I appreciated them emailing me. I didn't appreciate the tone and candor of the message because they were very disappointed that we would include that in the show. And how dare we? If we make mistakes, it's 10:13 right now at night. We're if we make mistakes, just let us know. But please don't be disappointed by anything I do because I can't stand disappointment. I can only strive to improve myself and Paul.
Well, we appreciate that correction. Do you want to talk about this Hamburg Sea Devils thing too?
Because we're on the Elf Kick. We had Josh Davis on last week. This is just interesting that Hamburg, the Sea Devils, parted ways with their head coach, Ted Dashier. They're 2-0 and tied for the North Division lead, which doesn't really, it's 2 games so far. But they got rid of him. They fired their head coach. The offensive coordinator is going to take over. They go, the quote from the league was, in the past few weeks have unfortunately shown us that we have different views and expectations regarding the philosophy and leadership of this team. Therefore, it is only logical, regardless of success, to make a change at top. I mean, this guy, we might have to have Josh Davis because this is his team. Josh Davis covers the undefeated Hamburg Sea Devils, and they're actually my unofficial team as well of Elf. But they kicked their head coach to the curb. That was remarkable.
That's remarkable.
That's remarkable. There you go.
You laugh at me for using that word, but
that is remarkable that they fired their head coach. They fired.
It's such a wordy statement too. It's we're going to write a novel about why we fired this coach. Oh. There you go.
There you go. There we go. So, we're not going to do any more of the ads. So there you go. That's good.
There's no Manscaped. They've paused the partnership because only one of you used the promo code.
You mother effort.
I want to see if the promo code still works. I think I'm going to log on anyway and just try to put the promo code in. If it still works, use it. I'll let everybody know on Twitter if it still works. And if it still works, please use it so we can maybe get that partnership back. So
okay, so this is a box. So context for end of the show here. Thank you all for listening. Lots of XFL stuff today. Hopefully we have record viewership. I'm sure there's an on 0% chance that someone from Redbird will watch this episode, just so you know, because Mike Mitchell's on it. Josh McGee, friend of the show, friend of CFL, Braden, Reddit, all that stuff. Josh mailed Paul a Argos gift package with all sorts of cool stuff. And so I don't think all of this is going to either be fittable for you or you're
I'm fat, Reed. Is that what you're saying? Because I'm fat?
Well, Josh, they were like very small items. I mean, this is like, it wouldn't fit on, this is like child small or whatever. But Josh is going to have a bunch of items in there. And then, we can do whatever we want with it. Anyway, so if you're listening, check out the YouTube, themarkcast.com/YouTube. Please subscribe. A lot of work this week. We got about 2 hours of interviews. Themarkcast.com/review if you want to leave a review for the podcast. Themarkcast.com/merch. I have my wonderful new Markcast shirt. These are really nice. They're nice, breathable. We got the hats backwards. It's all good. It's all good.
Okay, so I got a letter with this. Let's see. Hey, Paul, I hope this package finds you well. Well, it kind of does because, I've got a concussion. It was a bit of a quest to acquire these items for you. I feel like you went on a little RPG, Legend of Zelda Link to acquire these items. But it was well worth it since you have stated your intention in becoming an Argos fan, and I stick to that. I am still an Argonauts fan. As you may or may not know, you are legally entitled to ice cream as a CFL fan due to a terrible bet by a certain Ottawa Reddit mod made.
That's Braden.
Can you tell me what the bet was?
Braden, there was something where they were live Redditing a game and they didn't have a lot of traction. And Braden was like, if this thread gets to, 1,500 posts or something by the end of the game, I'll buy everybody ice cream. And so it did. And so to this day, Braden owes every single member of CFL Reddit. So when we go to the Grey Cup and Braden's there, he actually owes us both ice cream.
Very cool. Hopefully we'll have both of our teeth issues fixed by then so we can enjoy said ice cream.
Yeah, Monday.
Who eats ice cream in December in Hamilton?
Yeah, that is true. That is true.
Okay.
I took the week off. I just bought, just so you know, today actually, I just marked off my whole week of December to go up to, I'm done, man. I'm spending the whole week in the drunken stupor.
Why not? So he's throwing some shade here on Braden. He says, Braden, you've done a terrible job of paying back your debt to the CFL community, but the Argos, they take care of their own, and he's been trying to rectify these injustices where he can. He's shipping ice cream to Los Angeles. That's somewhat challenging, so I hope you like it freeze-dried.
Yeah, I think he sent you freeze. He sent me a whole list. Also, Josh, he messaged me. He's like, he had the shipping confirmation, and he's like, hey, this got delivered. Does Paul have it? I go, message Paul.
Yeah, please.
It's 7 a.m. Message Paul.
I want to welcome you again to the world's oldest professional football franchise and hope that you find just as much enjoyment in this team as I do. Keep doing what you're doing at the Markcast, and hopefully I'll see you at a game this season so we can share a Bev or 9. A Bev, is that the
or 9? A Bev or 9?
Bam, I am diabetic. I don't think that's going to be appropriate.
We need to plug this in the promo too so people know this.
Okay, so this is the first thing we're going to be giving away, and I have not disclosed. There's an allergy that I have. This is from St. Anne's Bakery. It's Never Melt freeze-dried treats. It is chocolate iced coconut cream.
Okay, Josh McGee is failing first off. Josh, that is the ultimate failure. You're trying to kill Paul. Paul.
Josh, I am Puerto Rican and I am allergic to coconut. It's the most ironic thing you'll ever hear of. And I appreciate the sentiment, but I am allergic. That he might as well send a hired assassin to your house right now. That is right? Next thing is this. This is cool. This is Argos football towel.
Oh, that's cool.
Very cool.
Yeah, Bell Media. That's a Canadian thing.
I think I'll keep that.
Okay.
Oh, this is badass. Grey Cup champions. Doesn't have the year, but it says Grey Cup champions in the A.
There you go. I like
that. Cool. A little toque for me, or maybe someone else. Yikes. Oh, here we go.
I'm starting to realize how unfun it is for you to be on the other side of all these unboxings I do. Like, oh yeah, that's cool.
Oh wow, this is cool. This is
like nice.
This is I guess a practice.
I lost your audio again. Paul, unplug the microphone. I'm not editing this one. Paul, unplug the microphone. Can't hear you. There you go. I'm not even editing this one out. We're at the end. Paul unplugged the microphone again.
I didn't unplug the microphone. That's just shorting out.
What was that? Show that one off.
It was this extra large Toronto Argonauts.
So that's a Paul Fit one. That's good.
That is definitely a Paul Fit one. Something fell. I don't know. Can you hear me still?
I can.
Okay.
We're getting through it. I have to be in Leavenworth for a wedding in like 12 hours.
Sorry.
That's okay.
I'm trying here. All right. This is a bobblehead. A Derek Walker Toronto Argonaut bobblehead.
I was going to say maybe it was
Daryl Walker. I'm sorry. What?
It should have been pinball.
Pinball?
Pinball's like their new GM at the Argos.
Oh. Daryl Walker bobblehead.
We don't need to open that. Okay.
Don't need to open that.
Yeah, we don't need to open that right now.
Reed's got a wedding in Leavenworth or something. All right. Oh, wow. And I think this is what he was talking about. The thing that will not fit me.
Yeah. Something's vintage. There's something vintage in there.
It's a Argonauts. It's an Argonauts vintage jersey. It's a medium. It would fit you, Reed.
Yeah, that's close. I'm older now. I'm getting a little.
Look, here's the deal. Reed can out-eat me, and he still stays relatively thin compared to me. He works out a lot more than I do. So we have this. We'll be giving this away. If you're a medium, we'll be figuring out a way to give this.
We'll figure out a big giveaway.
Give away that. And I'm just taking my sweet ass time opening all this stuff, aren't I?
There's another jersey.
Hurry the F up.
Josh spent a lot on this.
Yeah, Josh hooked it up, man. This is a small jersey.
Okay, so
it's an Argonauts.
Like jersey. Friend of the show, Jenna. If you didn't have your Ocho Cinco ball, that looks like it'd be a Jenna-size jersey. Looks like her colors too, with their with the Renegades. Dallas Renegades.
Yeah, so we've got two jerseys, a small and a medium. We'll be giving away. I'm going to keep the long sleeve Toronto Argonauts shirt for myself. Whenever Reed has that look on his face, I'm hoping that Mike hasn't cut out yet. So if that's the case,
I'm looking at the list. Yeah, he says 2012 Argos jersey, 2013 throwback jersey, 2017 hat, towel, bobblehead, XL jersey, the never dried ice cream, and then the letter from him to you.
Okay, so here's what I'm gonna do. I'm gonna take. Well, I don't know when I'm going back to work, but I do know that my friend Nydia loves coconut stuff, so I will give this to her, and she will enjoy this, and that'll be great.
Maybe she should leave a review of the podcast to qualify for that.
That's what I'll tell her. I'm like, I got some treats for you, some freeze-dried treats. I can't eat them, Avi. One time, Nydia actually put coconut lotion on. Almost killed me. Wow. That was fun. But yeah, I appreciate this a lot, Josh. This is awesome. Thank you for hooking this up, man. We got some good stuff to give away now, and thank you again. I will definitely keep the bobblehead. I'm going to put the bobblehead right there on my shelf. It'll join the collection because everyone in sports talk radio, these kinds of things, has a collection of crap, like little figurines and helmets and stuff. So I'll put it up there, and I'll definitely appreciate this long sleeve shirt that you included as well. So
there you go.
There we go. Longest part of the podcast was the giveaway. I should have probably opened the box and known what I was going through, but it was like Christmas for me because I never get anything sent to me. So what can I say?
There you go. We just, like I said, make sure we plug it in the promo because we forgot to talk about it at the top of the show. So
yeah. So thanks again for listening. Again, head over to our YouTube channel, subscribe, hit the bell notification for new episodes, and thanks for listening. We'll see you next week.